Oh, hi everybody. What are you doing here?
Fancy meeting y'all here. Hello. Every
That
day
sounded
I'm
a lot more
scruffling.
legit than mine.
Every day I'm scruffling. Look who decided to show up for once. Jams.
Oh, I thought you were talking about me. I was like, yeah, here I am.
No, you popped up even for me today when I needed to run out. JT just portals over sometimes and just pops on in. And it's so funny too because people don't realize it, like, because you and I are in constant communication literally all day.
All day.
So, but people don't realize that. So, like, when they're hanging out with me for like 5 hours and then all of a sudden your face appears and you're like, and then you're gone again, it's like JT like portaled to us and said hello and then took off again. Love it.
Yes.
Love it. Love it. Love it. I am going to scroll back up. I feel like I haven't seen y'all in forever. What's it been? How many hours has it been? Like, not
Like
even
60 minutes.
Not even a lot.
That is 1 hour.
That is. You
That is 1
nailed
hour.
that. That is your math
Thank
is
you.
mathin' right there.
Thank you. That's all I got.
Hello. Chat was moving so fast today for those of y'all who were with us. And I say with us because JT may have only seen his face portaling in occasionally, but he was with us all day as well.
I was.
He was. He's I make him like basically hold my hand for everything I do now. I'm like, JJ.
That's not true. I don't have to hold a hand.
I need you. He's my emotional support, JT. Hi, Betsy.
My emotional support, JT. My ESJT.
Yes.
Hey, look, I joined myself.
Oh, look at that.
I'm not quite sure what that means for everybody, but that's fun.
That's fun. That's fun. Only Mesa sounds like the best trial ever. Look, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, if y'all have not been following the I keep saying Randolph, the Travis Rudolph trial that we started a couple days ago, you need to join the rewatch crew this weekend because it has been insane. And it has been absolutely just bonkers. And I don't even, I can't even, I don't even have the words. This is one, and our mods are just like fantastic and on top of everything and make my life a better place to live in. And they are the ones who were able to give us this like as a suggestion or whatever for the timeline. And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. You know, no clue it was going to turn out the way that it has. It has been bonkers. And we had, for most of the day, we had around 500, 600, 700 people. And then towards like the end of the day, we got up to like 994. So close to 1,000. So close.
I know. Oh, it was crazy to watch. I had gone away to take care of some actual like work, believe it or not. And then I came back and we had gone from like 500 and all of a sudden, boom, 800. And I was like, what happened? Yes, it's a crazy trial. This is a crazy trial. It was a crazy train today. I was waiting for Ozzy to come in and take care of a bat. It was insane. It had hit the wall, gone through the wall, and then approached another wall. Oh, boy.
Insane.
Hello.
Insane.
Hello, Lizzie B. Welcome to Night Court.
Welcome.
Join us.
Welcome.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, it's crazy. And if you're going to watch it, so JT put it on the playlist. So when you go on like because JT thinks about all those things that I don't think about, and he just handles crap for y'all so that you can organize. Because I'm not organized. My thought process is never organized like his is. He put everything into a playlist for this trial, so you can go in there. Okay, but the first day of it is the same. We started that one on the same day that Richard Merritt was ending. So the main thumbnail thing is Richard Merritt, but it has like a little thing on the side of like a little football player on the side. But that's because we kind of bounce back and forth. So we start off with Merritt and then we start on that one, and then Merritt gets a verdict. So we go back to Merritt and then we go back to that one. But everything on the first day is on that one. Second day was yesterday. That one was freaking bananas.
Wait a second. Wait. Candace just gifted 5 memberships. Thanks, Candace.
Thank you, Candace.
I'm able to say this now. Kim Farnham, Be Kind, Sunshine Girl, 6431, Terry Thompson, and Sherry Sims Rue. Thank you so much. You've been gifted a membership by Candace Hoff. And that means that you can an E because copyright. And you also can grab your jury chair, pull it up, and you got a good seat. I think you got a good seat. Speaking of seats, we need to cover something first, don't we?
Yep.
So let's do that real fast. Look, we're on both sides. Oh my goodness, look who we got going on. We got 80s Music Man was first. He's a repeat offender. He's there. Like, I put it public and he's right there. Second place is Candace Hoff, and you get that. Wow, that's a lot fancy. You know what that is? That stool is like a middle school science stool. And I can't tell you how much my non-butt self hated those, because it is harmful to your lower back, because that's all I got is a lower back. And it is harmful to sit on forever and ever. And it feels like it forever. And then Kelly Bobelli, you get yourself the beanbag chair, complete with a protective plastic cover, because we care. So you all, there you are. There are your items, your things. And yeah, that's exciting, huh?
Yes.
So let me discard.
Oh, I will add Lucy the Pig. Y'all know I have no problem showing off that little sweet baby. Guarantee. Next one on, what's our next stream on Tuesday morning? Lucy will be making a guest appearance. See, there you go. Queen Oliver Van. She said it's comfortable. There you have it. Heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, but like the Lisa Dempsey said, I'm part of the Butt High Club too, JT. I feel your pain. Just say it. It is what it is.
Oh, well.
Sometimes I think I need to sit on a pillow. It's not that bad. Oh, look, there you go. My grandma had the stool in the kitchen for when it was peeling potatoes time. Oh,
there you go.
Goodness gracious. All right. So the other thing that we want to talk about is this, right? I think we want to talk about this. You want to talk about this?
Yeah,
Shall
sure. We? Yes. So, our least favorite crazy cult lady, and not the good kind, Lori Vallow, she has filed a motion for a new trial. Oh yes, you can get a BBL. We need to find out who got Dominique hers, and put you on the list.
No, because I think it had a permanent impact on her personality. And I prefer not to, truly. I didn't hear all of it, but I heard just enough. Just enough.
It don't take much with her to be just enough. She's a pill.
Never. All right.
Okay, so yeah,
yes.
Lori Vallow, go ahead. You want to? I don't have my old lady glasses on. You want to give them a little synopsis?
State of Idaho plaintiff versus Lori Vallow Daybell defendant. Motion for a new trial. You heard right. Motion for a new trial.
Idiot.
So, let's see. Let's see if I can get back to the point. There we go. Here's some reasoning. Yeah, sit down, John Thomas. The court misdirected the jury in a matter of law as it related to the jury instructions on conspiracy. The indictment filed by the grand jury states that the conspiracy is Chad Guy Daybell, Lori Noreen Vallow, and Alex Cox, deceased, and other co-conspirators, both known and unknown. The language clearly states that at least 5 people entered into a conspiracy: Chad, Lori, Alex, and other conspirators. The trial court, however, at the government's request, allowed the trial jury to consider a conspiracy of only 2 people: Lori and Chad, Lori and Alex, or Chad and Alex. This change of the definition of conspiracy from the grand jury to the trial jury completely changed the complexity of this case by allowing the insertion of, John Thomas chuckled to himself when he said that, when he typed that, of the, welcome to Night Court, everybody, of the and or language. So That's one. The court misdirected the jury in a matter of law as it related to the amended indictment. At the close of the evidence in this case, the government moved to amend the indictment 2 years after it was filed by the grand jury for a clerical error. The amended was not a clerical error, but changed the statute in the definition of grand theft. Repeated attempts by the defense to remand the indictment last year were objected to by the government and denied by the court, which means it went through the process. It was denied. The court should have likewise denied, but they still, I guess, can complain about it. Should have denied the government's request to amend the indictment. Number 3, a juror interview revealed that the jury instructions were confusing and that he knew of evidence not submitted to the jury. Juror number 8 was interviewed by East Idaho News on May 17th. The juror and the reporter were very respectful of the process. Roughly halfway through the interview, an interesting discussion takes place for 2 minutes as follows. Having seen all the evidence, all the thousands of hours spent, how would you describe the efforts of law enforcement? You know, they did a good job with what they had. I don't know. That's really probably offensive. You know, they did a good job with what they had. I don't know that you could ever train for something like this. I think they did a good job with what they had. You question some things that happened. I'm sure there's a reason for it. You question had some things been done different early on, would any of us be here? Do you have an example of one of those things? We didn't consider this during our deliberations because it was clear to us the instructions were clear. Arizona evidence and testimony is only for demonstrative purposes. Sure, yes. And we were all very, very respectful of the rule. So the question, they're basically saying that the evidence, the jury was confused. The juror's comments are that Charles Vallow's statements to law enforcement were not part of the evidence presented in the case. For these reasons, the defense asked the court to vacate the judgment and order a new trial. Oral argument is requested. I bet it is, John Thomas. I bet it is.
We just did a poll.
We are doing. Did I take? Yes. Yes.
Can you tell? Can you tell?
A lot of theater. I originally was a theater major in college, and then I just changed and did a lot of community theater, a lot of musicals. But really, I'm just incredibly manic and crazy. So all the voices in my head tell me I'm okay though. So.
Oh goodness.
Yep. Samantha said, "Scratch the poll. I accidentally pushed yes."
Oh, way to go.
Okay. No, John Thomas does not get the stool.
No, we need to make another addition to our chair thing and put a timeout thing for people who hit the wrong button. Samantha. Sorry, y'all. I've been watching this trial during the day, and it makes me have my sassy pants on. This is not my fault. Oh, we have a new emoji since you've been here last time. For those of you who haven't been here during the day, the ones that you've been.
Oh yes.
Because this one came from the day stream yesterday. There's
a few. So the first one is your sassy pants. I just put it in the chat. And then there's the OMG emoji, the peach emoji for the BBL, the 100%, the side eyes, the popcorn, and yes, the Lucy.
Yes. Love it.
Oh my gosh. Samantha, I totally feel your pain. Hold on. It's going to pop up here in a second and I can bring it up. There it is. My thumbs. Can we talk about thumbs for a second? Because it was my thumbs that totally ported us completely out yesterday. Oh, good grief.
It was
started on the volley already.
It was.
Oh Lord, I'm a bit late tuning in.
It was kind of funny though, because we were like chatting and like JT portaled in, and this is like right before court had started, and we're just starting the stream and stuff, and he portaled in, and then he was like, "All right, I'm gone," and then we were all gone. Like everybody was gone. Everything ended. It was over. That was it.
11 I called minutes. And I was like, "Oh my God! Oh no!"
11 minutes of stream, and then it was gone. So then we quickly set up a second one, and I go into that one, and we're trying to get into that, and then we're still trying to figure out what the heck happened with the portal and what's going on. So the second video starts with JT on his phone driving. Don't tell his mom. Driving with his camera on with the StreamYard, and we're trying to figure out. And I'm still sitting at my computer wondering what the heck just happened to my portal. And so the first part of the video the first part of the second video starts yesterday with us confused, him in his car, just hang out, give it 25 seconds and you'll be fine. But that was yesterday. And that's JT's thumbs. Thanks, JT's thumbs.
Oh, it's the big old, I can't help it. What are you going to do? I did disturb the space-time continuum. I have done this. Doctor Who has been very pissed off at me, but time is more like a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey thing. So, if you like Doctor Who, you know what I mean. If you don't, you think I'm weird, and that's okay, because that's on brand for me, too. Oh, so much happening. So much going on.
Let's look at our numbers. Let's look at our numbers.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't looked at them. Do you remember what we were at last time? We were at 663 members last time we read it out, because I still have that written over here. So let me get it pulled up. Y'all just hang tight. Also, today is my daddy's birthday. Happy birthday to my daddy.
Happy birthday.
He would have been 66 today. All right, members. We have. Is that right?
If you're looking at the number that I saw earlier, probably
772. We really have
Check it out.
772 members.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Wow. That's so cool. We have 772 members. And we are at 6,295 subs. Yay.
It's been just over a month, right?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. You guys are awesome. We love you
Nuts.
so much. Just
nuts.
seeing all the green that's here is just awesome. It's just awesome. Can we talk about the sneaker punch earlier?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
All I'm saying is that there are so many merch ideas that run through our heads when these things happen. In fact, Polly, one of our mods, has an entire list of ideas, and we are very excited to eventually share them with you. Hey, Brandi, we're getting real close to clogging time.
Oh, I thought y'all would forget about that.
No, you better start carving. You better start carving.
Oh my gosh, yes. When we get to 10,000 subs, I have to clog on stream. I don't know whose idea that was.
Somebody shared the video with me. Let me see if I can find it real quick. And was like, "Hey, you should record this and do it." And all I could think of was, "Don't threaten me with a good time." Because obviously you all have seen the wig. You've seen the wig, so you know that I have no shame. Does not exist.
That's true.
Where is it? Where is it? And Brandi, you may or may not have seen this before. It's one of my favorite clips. Oh, good grief. Where is it? Oh, you know what? I can just look it up. I know what it is.
Dang. Look at Holly Berry talking like me. Dang, y'all. Melissa Dotson brought cake.
Here it is.
See. Oh.
Let's see if I can cut it a little bit here. Hold on. Hold on. I just got to get the right thing. Okay, there it is. All right. Here we go. That'll be fine.
I want you to step, bump.
Yes, I've seen this. I love it.
5, 6, 7, 8. Step, bump, bump. Step, bump. Pot of beret. Kickball chain. Step, clap.
Okay.
5, 6, 7, 8.
You know what would be good is if
This is me, 100%.
And then you kind of did that, and then a barrel turn, and then
I love it.
Can I tell you
gosh,
before I really knew about Reno 911, right? Before I really knew about it, I seriously thought that was a legit clip. I'm an idiot. But I will say this: the more that I do this trial thing, I'm thinking it still could be a real clip.
I
So,
know.
that's all I'm saying.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
So
great?
funny.
It's
So
so
funny.
good. It's so good. I absolutely love it. I adore it. It's fantastic. Oh, goodness. You guys, we have 69 likes on this. And as much as I appreciate 69 likes, hit the like button for us, please.
Yes, please. It's helping, y'all. It's helping our little community grow because we've been, I'm terrible about forgetting to hit the like button. I'll be the first one to tell you. So when the mods and everybody remind me, I'm always like, I'm on it now.
Oh,
I'm glad you
I
told me.
forgot something. I have to go get it. Entertain the masses for a second. Go ahead and sing something.
Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had. Y'all don't want to hear me sing. Okay, one other thing that I can talk to you about while he is doing whatever the heck he's doing. Trial Mama's calendar coming soon. I was going to try to work on it the other day. I have literally sat at this computer for about 18 hours a day the last, I don't even know how many days since Tuesday. So I have not had a chance to do it. But with a 3-day weekend, I'm not going to do anything tomorrow. I'm going to be on a boat. I'm going to be away from my computer, and I will not be clicking or looking at anything. But either Sunday or Monday, I'll get it updated. Trial Mama's calendar. So we will have that ready for you on Wednesday nights. Night Court stream. Trial Mamas will be here Wednesday, and no court on Monday. No night court and no day court on Monday.
Okay, so you guys know, like 48 hours ago, I opened up a mailbox, and then 24 hours after that, I got a message, and I got a message from the store. It was like, you got a package. And I was like, hold on. It was weird enough to have to open a box, but then 24 hours later, and I got a message from Frankie, Gracie, and Wilbur, and it said, let's see here. If we are going to listen to lying liars try to sell us poop, it should at least have glitter in it. Squish away the complete nonsense testimony we hear. Enjoy. And what they sent is amazing. It's literally, it's an entire bag. It is an entire bag of like, hold on, I gotta move my mic. It's an entire bag of shiny plastic with faces poop. And I have like a bunch of them. And I'm very, very excited. Because it's true. If you're gonna have to deal with BS, at least make it sparkly, right? At least make it sparkly. So thank you. Thank you so much. Where are you? Where are you? Everything moved again. I don't like when that happens.
Oh my gosh, I was doing that all day. I was like,
here, there she is. Thank you. As soon as I got home, I immediately sent a picture to Brandi, and I was like, look at the poop. And a really, really funny thing about this is that I gave 2 to my kids, and my kid, one of my kids, ran into the kitchen and said, "Mom, other kid is throwing my poop across the living room." No context. It makes no sense, but here we are. So.
Oh my gosh! Imagine not knowing that that you had sparkle poop, and that was just the sentence that was. That's really funny.
I was thinking about what to do with it, and some of the mods were like, 100% you should just like drop it in tip jars. I was like, all of a sudden the city would hate me. Oh, I wish. No.
Nope. And we even tried to do like a virtual high five and failed miserably. We were like, wait. We tried to do this one night. Okay, ready? Oh, I look like I punched you. We tried.
I don't.
Yeah, we're terrible at it.
Just shake my hand. Just shake my hand. It's fine. Da, 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 da. Okay.
We haven't. We're not even drunk yet. No. Haven't even drank. We're just weird.
It's true. Poop throwing. Oh gosh, my
That's so
goodness.
funny.
Well, lots going on in this world of 13th Juror, and we're very grateful for you all. We're glad that you're here. We could not do this without you. I think it's very evident. You guys, the mods, there's just no way. It's not possible. What this has become is just, it just blows us
Crazy.
away. Yeah, it just
Yes.
blows us away. Pretty much every morning is that text back and forth from Brandi me like, can you believe it? No, I can't believe
Yeah.
it. Can you believe it? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So we are very, yeah.
We're like,
She's-
we're like, somebody wanted to like send us something, and it's like not even like anthrax or like this is like something like somebody wanted to send us something like that kind of stuff, and like people like want to hang out with us. Like y'all are hanging out with us on a Friday night, and like
it took 35 years to find somebody who wanted to hang out with me.
and now you've got 770 something of us.
Mm. Thanks for putting up with me. Yeah, I don't know why you threw that out there.
I was thinking of things that people mail that are bad, and that was bills and anthrax were the only two things that came to mind.
I was like, I'm okay with the band, I guess, sometimes, but that is not what you meant at all.
No, I was thinking of like
slightest.
bad things, like things that you don't want to get in the mail, and bills and anthrax were the only two things I thought of. Yes.
These kind of comments, it's these kind of comments that just make us so happy. And Lisa, Brandi has not put that down.
I literally have
not put that down at all.
Not at all. I've literally drank from it since I got it. I just washed it out carefully and then drink it again.
Abe, you can mail me your bills, but I can't say they're going to get paid. So it might not be helpful.
Mine, they'll go in the stack with mine that don't.
Yeah, right? Right? There's a reason I have 5 different jobs. It's not to make a ton of money, y'all. Oh, goodness gracious. Also, just as a reminder, if you are a member, you can do !seat and you get your seat. So I love seeing that little thing. Pop you right on in the jury box.
Oh, goodness gracious. It's getting bigger. I think that I wonder how many of our night quarters have not seen the day stream. Somebody had asked me today if we could clip the stuff together and like condense it, like condense our stream together or something, and do it as a premiere, so that the people who hadn't watched it. Oh. Something about if you do it as a premiere, then people, even though we're not live, people can watch it and chat together.
Yeah. Do you know
what that is? Okay. So if that's something that y'all that are going to be on the replay crew want to do, so you can chat with each other about the ridiculousness going on, let us know. I don't know how hard or how easy that would be.
It's easy.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
It's just a setup. So
Jim says I want to do that. So maybe we can try to get that set up for you so that y'all can do that. So even though we're not going to be here, because
like on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we could do that.
There you go.
What am I sipping on? Bottom shelf wine. No, it's called California Dream. It's Pinot. It's a Pinot. And it's like right in the middle of sweet and dry. It's pretty good. I enjoy it. I had red wine the other night, and I was like regretting it the next day for 5 hours because the tannins. Laid back.
I'm still drinking on some of my corked, like some of my congratulations corks, my exciting corks or whatever the heck I call it. I'm still drinking on some wine from my last cork that I opened that I still haven't finished the wine.
Yes. All right. So here's, I kind of want to give you guys a little preview of tonight. We are either going to stop at the end of this first video because it's going to be heavy. Or there's going to be a lot of making fun of Jodi because there's nothing else to joke about really. Hey, look, it's Terry. This is my co-host from True Crime and Wine Time.
Hi.
Yes. Eventually, we should have Terry on. You would love Terry.
Do you want to come on?
Excuse me.
We
can put her on now. Does anybody,
wanna...
everybody, would you like to see is Terry? I don't know. I'd have to see if she's up for it.
I know, I'm just trying to like throw her on in here. I'm like, hey, come on.
Right. She got a lot going on. But she could, Terry, if you want to come on, just comment real quick before we get into this. It's a shorter video tonight, and by that I mean it's 2 hours long. But I will say that it is heavier because it is the medical examiner. Oh, so everybody's saying, bring her in.
Portal her
Terry,
on in.
Oh well,
Terry's
nope.
Oh well, okay, all right. Well, maybe. Abort
Not that
mission.
kind of show tonight. Abort.
We'll say that for our OnlyFans show.
Listen, thanks to Cajun and Polly, we are on a lot of different socials, but not that one. I'm very committed to this channel. You know that very much. I don't know if I'm that committed, nor do I think anybody else here is committed. Anyways, so y'all, Terry is wonderful. I absolutely love her to death. I've known her for a few years now, and the show is True Crime and Wine Time, and we're on pretty much everywhere you can get your podcasts. We're working on updating on a couple of ones, but definitely check it out for sure. She's great, and yep, rain check. We're gonna do a rain check for sure. In fact, Terry, I think you would really like our WTF show. So, I think that would be fun to do. I have so many friends to introduce you all to from the podcast world. I can't wait. I'm so psyched for that. There's a creamsicle drink.
Oh my gosh. Where were you when I was talking about it? Yeah, it's orange soda and whipped cream flavored vodka. It'll change your life.
It might make me vom.
It might do that too. Yeah.
I'm like white wine and gin, and that's about it.
Yeah, it's so good. So good. All right, y'all, I love y'all so much. I'm going to jump off because I've been streaming all day, and if I sit in this chair anymore, I'm going to pass out. So I am going to go lay in my bed, and I'm going to be just lurking. So I will chat a little bit as I'm lurking, but I need to get these headphones off of my head and get out of here. So, and actually the bubble bath thing sounded really nice. So maybe that's what I'll do. And I'll be just like lurking, hanging out with y'all, but not with headphones on because this is like too much for me right now. I appreciate y'all so much. And I tend to do that a lot and I don't realize I do it. That's my sassy pants coming out. But I love y'all so much. And I cannot thank you enough for everything y'all done. And for this week has gone nuts with us being like the last couple weeks, whatever, we're like the day streams and all this stuff. And it's just, we've grown so much and we just appreciate y'all more than you know. And our mods are freaking unreal, like how amazing they are and how much they do. So I love y'all. I'll be lurking. I'll be chatting. I'm watching y'all. I love y'all. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
There she goes. That was the really awkward moment where it's like, you hang up. No, you hang up first. No, you hang up first. And then you hang up and then you're like, oh crap. That's not how that was supposed to go. Oh, goodness gracious. We've been left alone. I think we're alone now. I actually don't know the rest of the lyrics to that. I probably should. I should. Anyway, so here's what's happening tonight. There's a 2-hour long video. It is the medical examiner. We'll see how everybody's feeling at the end of it. And I think there's not much more to that day after that. However, I just want to let you guys know. The other thing that you need to know is that there are going to be some pictures that are going to pop up. Now, I'm going to do my best to bring up a picture, just any picture when it happens, because it's much easier than me just trying to drag my face everywhere and block it. So I will try very, very, very hard to bring it up really fast. I kind of looked through everything today, so I'm hoping that I can cover it. But we'll do the best. Lisa, they're not big. Do you mean the big bulky wrestlers? Those ones? That's really funny. So yes, perfect. Thank you. There's going to be some detailed descriptions of violent, deviant themes, evidence that's graphic. I'm going to do my best. To bring the photo up as soon as I can. So just kind of like, bear with me as that happens. So there might be a little bit of an over. Who is that? There are so many answers that you could use for that are really funny, but probably also really not great in general to say. All right. So when that stuff comes up, we'll put up the pictures, and all of you are probably just like, hey, just get to it, JT. We know what's coming, and so I will. So here we go, everybody. This is going to be. Why am I blanking now? I'm sorry. This is Dr. Kevin Horn. He's the medical examiner, and he takes the stand. And here we go. Maybe.
Your name, sir?
Dr. Kevin Horn,
And who do you work for?
Maricopa County Medical Examiner's Office.
How long have you worked there?
Almost 12 years.
And what is it that you do over there at the medical examiner's office?
I am a medical examiner. I'm charged with examining deceased individuals and certifying a cause and manner of death within the county.
And in terms of your education, where did you go to medical school?
The University of Maryland,
And what year did you graduate?
1995.
When did you begin working for the medical examiner's office again?
2001.
And drawing your attention back to June of 2008, did you have occasion to conduct a medical examination on the body of Travis Alexander?
Yes.
With regard to an examination of an individual such as this, what are the first steps that are taken?
The body is received under seal. It's in a sealed body bag with a number that's unique to that case. That seal is broken in my presence. The bag is opened, and then we examine the outside of the body, collecting evidence, performing photographs, and then we move on to an external examination, documenting injuries, and then an internal examination or an autopsy.
In this particular case, were there any x-rays taken?
Yes.
And what is the purpose of the x-rays?
Mostly to document internal trauma and
2013.
projectiles that we may need to
Crime
recover.
happened in 2008.
I'm going to show you some photographs. Take a look at exhibits 170 through 173.
Hit the website.
You recognize those?
I do.
And are these photographs that were taken as part of your medical examination of Travis Alexander?
Yes.
And specifically, do they include the identification photograph as well as the x-rays?
Yes.
I move for the admission of exhibits 170 to 173.
Any objection?
Judge, I would object to one number 170.
Council approach.
Oop. I love the
Exhibits
fact that they fast forward through all that.
170 through 173 are admitted.
Oh, she lost real hard.
Let's take a look at exhibit 170. And what is this number that's here on the left here?
083532. That's our case number for the year.
Is that the same as the number that came in the bag or in the sealed bag, or is that a different number?
There's an individual seal number on the bag, but the case number is separate from that.
And this is the face identifying the individual that was brought in, correct?
Yes.
The radiographs or the x-rays that were done in this particular case, were they done before you conducted your exterior examination or afterwards?
Before.
Let's take a look then at exhibit number 171. And what are we looking at here?
We're looking at a frontal X-ray of the head, and on the left side, I'm sorry, on the right side of the X-ray, you can see a projectile.
When you said the left side, that would be the left side of Mr. Alexander, correct?
His left, our right, as we look at the X-ray.
Exhibit number 172.
Really?
What are
Ma'am,
we
an
looking at
X-ray?
here?
We're looking at a side view of the head, again, showing the projectile.
And this is where the projectile ended up, correct?
Yes.
Is it, and it is on the left side, even though this is the right aspect.
Yes, it's his
Hopefully
left
everybody's
cheek
okay with it.
area.
In looking at
X-rays.
173, this is a radiograph or an X-ray of the top or the top portion
does
or the
look like
chest
Daria.
portion. Why was this taken, or does the medical examiner's office just take a full view X-ray of everybody that comes in?
We usually do a full series of, especially in homicides, we'll do a full series of X-rays to look for any sort of hidden projectiles or any sort of, especially in a stabbing case, we'll look for the tip of a knife or something like that, something that could harm us as we're doing the examination.
And is there anything that is shown in this X-ray as it applies to the stabbing or the shooting?
No, there's no metal fragments
There's no
visible.
tears. I don't believe it.
As part of
Enjoy the bush.
your
I hear that it's
examination,
comfy.
The external examination, did you take a look at the hands?
Yes.
Take a look at exhibits 174 through 183 and see if that depicts photographs of Mr. Alexander's hands.
Yeah, this is where I'm going to have to get creative. Hopefully.
Yes.
I move for the admission of exhibits 174 through 183.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibits 174 through 183 are
Hair curtain.
admitted.
We got the hair curtain.
Let's take a look at exhibit 174. What are we looking at here?
The back of the right hand.
Sir, one of the things that
Oh,
we
there
know
it
in
is.
this case
Okay.
is that the body was in its home for a while or days before it was actually discovered. So was there any decomposition that was associated with the body? And are we looking at any in this particular photograph, or was it other parts of the body?
Yes, there was a state of what we would call intermediate decomposition or the middle stage of decomposition, and it involved the whole body. And in this picture in particular, we can see green discoloration of the hand and also early, what we call mummification of the fingertips.
And if you take a look over here on the thumb, why is that dark? Or I guess in the rest of the hand?
It's dried.
And is that part of the mummification process that you described for me?
Yes.
Are there any injuries to the upper portion of Mr. Alexander's right hand?
No.
Let's take a look at exhibit 175.
Sorry, you get to look at my face for a second.
Now the fingers are extended and we do see that there is some darkness on each of those fingers. Do you see it? Fingernail areas. Do you see that?
Yes.
What causes that?
Again, that's decompositional change.
And are there any injuries on the top of the arm?
There is an injury to the thumb, which I don't think is really clearly visible in this photograph.
Yeah.
All right, let's then take a look at exhibit number 176, which shows us what? What are we looking at here?
This is the palm of the right hand, and I think there may be another picture that shows this better, but there is an incised or a cutting injury of the tip of the right thumb.
And exhibit 177, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
In looking at injuries, are you able to tell whether they were made before death, after death, or at the time of death as part of the examination?
Sometimes it depends on the case.
How about this one right here? Could you tell by looking at it and conducting an analysis whether or not this was done either before death, at the time of death, or after death?
I think it was done before death. There is hemorrhage associated with it.
When you say that there's
My
hemorrhage
face
associated
gives it
with
away.
it, explain
Yep.
that a little bit more to me. What is it that causes a person to hemorrhage if they're alive, which is what I think you're telling me.
Well, if you have a heartbeat, you're going to have blood flow to an area that's injured, and so you'll have blood flow from an injury. So if the skin is cut or torn, there will be a great deal of blood that will come from that injury in a living person. A deceased person will ooze some blood, but not a great deal.
So in this one right here, it is your opinion that Mr. Alexander was alive when this was inflicted?
Yes, taking into consideration what I said and also in context with other injuries that are on the hands.
And what kind of injury is this one that we're looking at?
It's a sharp force injury. It's caused
figure
by
out.
a blade or a sharp forced object.
They don't do this the whole time. I promise.
If an individual, let's get away a little bit from a knife right now and just focus on the
Hair curtain.
individual maybe who is dragged or is hit, that kind of thing. If an individual is dead and somebody applies some force, hits them, are they going to bruise necessarily or not?
There may be something that would look like a bruise, but it will not be as large and the color will be different in a deceased person because there's no blood
I'll have
flow
to look
the
that
area.
up.
So you're actually just breaking blood vessels in that area.
We are hoping to have
and whatever
him
blood
on, though,
happens to be
so
there
maybe he
will
can tell
ooze
us.
out, but there won't be blood pumped into the area.
And part of the reason I ask that is I see that there's sort of like on top of it, a little bit of a darker area. Is that mummification or is that bruising?
Nope. Sorry.
It may be a combination
Sorry,
of both.
everybody.
There's some darkening underneath the nail there, but in
Too
the
slow.
context of the mummification, I can't really say for sure.
Are you familiar with the term defensive wounds?
Yes.
And define that for me, please.
They're based largely on location on the body. If you have injuries to the backs of the forearms or to the palms or backs of the hands, you can have gunshot wounds in those locations, or in the case of an assault with a knife or an edged weapon, you can have cuts or incised injuries to the backs or the palms or the backs of the forearm, and it's consistent with someone trying to either grab the knife or fend off wounds or fend off injury.
And the way you described it, by necessity, the person would have to be conscious and alive, correct?
Yes.
And is this that we're looking at the right thumb, is that a defensive wound?
Could be, yes, consistent with that.
Let's take a look now at exhibit
okay.
number
Thanks, Debbie.
178.
We are trying to get him on, though. So, yay.
What do we see here?
It's the back of the left hand.
And again, with the back of the left hand, if you notice this little portion right here, what is that right there?
It appears to be what we would call a void in the blood. Maybe there's an area of pooling the blood the hand was resting in, and the blood is not staining that area.
Okay. But that's not an injury, correct?
No.
Exhibit 179,
I know they don't bother
what are
everybody.
we looking at there?
This is the back of the left
Folks
hand.
who want to
Do we see
enjoy
any
the
injuries
show,
here or
by
not?
show, I mean,
You can see the edge of an injury on the
They do bother.
side below the thumb, the side of the
Rather
hand,
not.
and then also on the back of the thumb. So there are two injuries that are partially visible here.
I can't two times
And
it.
Those injuries, if we look at
The
exhibit
unspoken
180,
channel
do those
will not
show
allow
those a
me
little
to.
bit more?
Yes, this is the palm of the left hand, again showing from the side of the thumb near the wrist. There's a fairly deep wound that's going into the muscle there. There are two separate wounds of the palm below the index finger. And then I believe there's another injury on the thumb that we've already described.
In looking at these, just to the naked eye, and obviously naked eye may not tell us everything, as we compare those to the injury to the right thumb, these seem to be a little bit deeper. Is that true or not?
Yes.
And how deep are these in comparison to the ones that we saw in the thumb?
The one on the thumb is fairly superficial. It just clips off part of the nail. This is actually going into the soft tissue and the muscle beneath the hand. So it's going in a depth of about 1/4 of an inch for all three injuries.
And if you look at this, are you able to tell us what type of blade is doing this other than that it's a knife blade?
All I can say is that it's a sharp edged object.
Take a look at exhibit 181. And this has a scale to it, correct?
Yes.
And so for those of us that are really not versed in metrics, how big would you say this one is, the larger of the two?
That measurement in inches is 1 3/4 inch,
And this one right here, the one down there?
3/4 of an inch.
Yep.
Taking a look at exhibit 182,
Just got to get past
Now
these
we're looking at
photos.
those first two injuries that we described, the one near the wrist and the one on the higher up on the thumb, correct?
Yes,
Were these also deep, this one that I'm pointing to near the wrist, was that deeper than the one on the right thumb?
yes,
And if we look at 183, we have the scale there, correct?
yes.
How big was that one?
That was measured in inches, 1 1/2 inch, and on the back of the thumb, 1 inch.
One of the things that we talked about with regard to the other injury to the right hand was whether or not they were consistent with defensive wounds. In this one, were these consistent with
freedom
defensive-
units,
defensive
doggone it.
wounds?
Yes,
And does that mean that Mr.
Makes no
Alexander was alive at the time that these injuries were inflicted?
I believe he was.
Would they have bled at the time?
Yes.
Let's take a look at exhibits 184 through 191.
Still got the hair curtain up. You're not missing anything.
Are you familiar with those photographs?
Yes,
Do they depict the injuries to Mr. Alexander's front area from the head down to, I guess it would be down to his toes, correct?
yes.
I move for the admission of exhibits 184 through 191.
She's reviewing them. She's reviewing them.
No objection.
184 through 191 are admitted.
Sir, will those
You know,
be
coming.
How tall was Mr., well, as part of the examination, is the body measured for height?
Yes.
How tall was Mr. Alexander?
69 inches,
That's 5'9",
5'9",
correct?
yes.
And how much did the body weigh at the time of the examination?
189 pounds.
The decomposition process, does that add weight or does that take away weight or does it just not affect it much?
Generally, you're not going to add weight. You'll take away weight. And also in a person who's been bleeding, that will also take away weight.
Thanks, Knoxville agent, for the stories. We can talk about them after. One, I'm not surprised. The other one, I'm surprised.
Take a look at exhibit 184. And I'm interested in this area here on the right arm. Do you see that right there? This area here?
Yes.
Yep. You can find it in the trial
Looks like
archives
it's
if you
some
want
sort
to
of
see the stuff.
veiny action going
but
on, veins or something.
not
Is
here.
that what that is or is that something else?
We term that marbling, and it's a decompositional change. It's bacterial action in the small veins under the surface of the skin.
How about right here in the middle of his stomach?
That is what we call skin slippage. It's also decompositional.
One of the things that appears to be there, and that may not be so, but it appears that the body is a little bit bloated. Do you see that?
Yes.
Again, is that something that's associated with decomposition, or is that really how he was in life?
these
do believe
photos
he
look
does have a bit
everywhere.
of bloating. He may have been a slightly heavy-set person in life, but there
I'm
is
not
some
quite sure
bloating,
how
and
they
that's
got
from
everywhere,
bacterial
but
gas.
2013,
formation
I
after
guess.
death.
Let's take a look at exhibit 185. On the shoulder there, do you see that?
Yes,
Is that an injury there?
yes.
How big is that injury in terms of inches? I know we have the metric scale there, but how big is that?
Brandy?
It's on the right shoulder.
Randy gave 5
Just looking at
memberships.
the photograph, you do have an English and a metric scale on the same side, so it's
Look at
about,
you, giving
each
back
of
to
them,
the
the largest
peoples.
of them is about an inch.
Is this a deep sort of cut, or is
Emily
this
Suzanne,
sort of a
Kristen
grazing
Chicago,
kind
Carrie
of?
Rader,
Very superficial grazing injury.
and
But it
Tipsy
would
Tracy,
bleed, correct?
Yes.
and
And
Casey.
how about this one right here?
Welcome to
that
the
we're
cult.
looking at right there?
Family.
This is
That
one-
is characterized as a stab wound, so it's actually a deeper wound, but it actually terminates at the breastbone, doesn't go into the chest cavity.
So as it was going in, it actually hit the breastbone and did not go any further, correct?
Right, yes.
Would this wound have been fatal, whether immediately or rapidly, or alternatively longer term?
Not in and of itself, no.
But it would bleed, correct?
Yes.
We then go to the one right here. First of all, how big is that one?
Just in looking at the scale, it's about 2.5 inches in length. It's transverse across the chest, or extending horizontally across the chest. And it's also, it's a deeply incised wound, so the blade is going below the skin, but it's not entering the chest cavity either.
You used the term incised that
Yes.
I don't think you used before. How do you define incised?
Oh, well, sharp force injuries are usually divided into stab wounds and incised wounds. So a stab wound is deeper than it is long on the surface of the skin, and the incised wound is just the opposite.
It's
So if you
longer
take
than it is deep.
Yes, if you take a razor and
She
cut
might
yourself on the
actually
skin,
be
that's an
emotional,
incised
but it's
wound.
because
But if you
she didn't
stab yourself
expect to
with a
see
knife, then that's a deeper wound.
the
And
pictures from
this one right here, which is
weeks
sort of
after.
below the chin
Oh.
and down here to the
That's what happens,
sort of the
babe. Look,
median. Can you tell me
See,
a little
look.
bit about that in terms of whether or not this is a stab wound, whether or not this is an incised wound? Can you tell me about that?
That's a stab wound, and I do think we do have better views of it, but that one actually penetrates a major vessel coming into the heart.
Let me show you then Exhibit 186. Is that the better view of it?
Yes.
so I'm gonna get
You
Dr.
said
G on the
something
phone.
about it going into the vessel of the heart. Why don't you explain to us a little bit about what the heart is and whether or not, when you said that it stabbed the vessel of the heart, whether it actually hit the heart, whether it hit the pericardium is what surrounds the heart,
The
right?
sac around the heart.
The sac.
yes.
Whether it hit that, if you could just sort of explain that one to us.
I do want to clarify first on the photograph that it's the lower of the two wounds there, so not the one next to the scale, but the
Right,
one
but
below
this
it
one that we're
is the
talking
one
about.
that goes into the vessel. What this actually does is it goes through the cartilage between the ribs and the breastbone. There's some softer cartilage, especially in young people. And this knife has penetrated that cartilage and gone through the sac that surrounds the heart, which is the pericardial sac. And it has perforated or passed through the superior vena cava, which is a major vein that comes down from the upper body and the head and drains into the heart. And then from there, the heart beats and pushes the blood elsewhere in the body. But it's a major vessel.
With regard to that major vessel, and I was talking about the tissue that encases the
That doesn't
heart,
work.
is that vein inside that tissue that encases the heart, or is it outside, on top of it? Where
It starts out outside and enters the sac and then enters the heart, which is fully within that sac.
And this knife wound, did it penetrate the sac and hit this vein or not?
Yes.
So what happens when when a knife goes in and causes this amount of damage or this type of damage?
Well, depending on the position of the body, you may have significant internal bleeding, or if the person is leaning forward, they may bleed outside of the body because there is a track leading from that vessel outside. But this is a major vessel. It's not going to bleed as fast as an artery, but it will bleed a considerable amount.
With regard to this considerable amount of bleeding that's going on, is this a wound that could kill this person?
Yes.
And do you have an estimate, or is there any science out there that tells you, well, this type of wound, given what I know about it, would take X amount of time?
No, it depends on so many factors. It depends on the person's health. It depends on care that they receive. It depends on their blood volume to begin with and the position of their body.
Also, with regard to a situation like that, what if we have a person who's asleep, relaxed, versus an individual who's animating, jumping up and running around? Does that affect the amount
That guy.
of blood that is being
For
lost
sure.
and how quickly the blood is being lost?
Yes, a person in action is going to have a rapidly beating heart and they will
Jawline.
lose blood more
Good
quickly.
grief.
And other than the blood coming out through here, we know that these others have bled also, correct?
Yes.
This one above and this one.
Thank you.
Would any of these
Welcome.
injuries, and for the example, this one, would, what we associate with television, would blood come out of the mouth, the ears, or just out of the chest area?
It depends on what's hit inside the body. If the lung was nicked, which is possible in this case because we're dealing with a decomposed body, so the organs aren't as pristine, they're not as, they don't lend themselves to examination as in a fresh individual. But if the lung is nicked, they can cough up blood. If you have blood going into the throat area, and he does have throat injuries as well, which we'll talk about, all of those can cause coughing up of blood or loss of blood out of the mouth and the nose.
There is death, and then there's also unconsciousness, correct? Those are two different things, right?
Yes.
With regard to this particular wound that's here at the bottom, is that something that would, once it's inflicted, would that cause Mr. Alexander to lapse into unconsciousness?
Eventually, yes, not immediately.
When you say eventually, do you have an estimate, maybe minute, seconds, between the time of infliction and the time that he would lapse into unconsciousness?
If that were the only wound, and it's not, probably a few minutes, because we're dealing with a vein and not an artery, so it's a lower pressure system, so blood loss is slower.
And how about if you take a look at that injury in connection with the things that we've seen with regard to his hands, the defensive wounds that we've talked about? Does that tell you, or at least in terms of time, does that indicate whether or not there was at least enough time for Mr. Alexander to attempt to defend himself and then get these other wounds to the hand?
With this wound to the heart, he should have been able to get his hands up and attempt to defend himself.
If he was in a seated position when this wound was inflicted, would he have the ability, even though this was inflicted, to get up and walk somewhere or move quickly somewhere, as a matter of fact?
Yes.
Exhibit number 187 shows us the injury to the right shoulder. Do you see that?
Yes.
Looks more like a scratch, doesn't it?
It's very superficial, yes.
Do any of these injuries, including the one to Exhibit 186, do any of these speak to movement or anything like that, or is just that's not something that these photographs show?
Since they're on multiple parts of the body, they imply a motion of the assailant or a motion of the decedent, and I can't say which of those is the case.
Exhibit 184, we do have the lower portion of his body, correct?
The lower part of the abdomen.
Right. And we have this injury here, right? And then we
Yes.
have these, right?
Yes.
If we go to Exhibit 188, is that a close-up of them?
Yes.
What are these down here as we look at it, to the lower part of his belly button?
There's another photograph which may not be entered into
Sure.
evidence, but there's a wound track that extends across the front of the belly from where this stab enters. So some of that, what you're seeing is blood actually appearing on the surface of the skin because of this track where the stab wound went is very close to the surface of the skin.
So what I think you're saying with regard to this stab wound is that it went something like that.
Yes.
And so if we do that from the opening to the longest one, how far is that?
I gave a maximum wound track depth of about 5 3/4 inches.
Dr. Horn is referring to his report. Can we have that marked, please?
Do you want to mark yours or do you want to mark another?
It's the same report, so.
I think we have one marked.
And I guess from now on, if you want to refer to your report, you can find Exhibit 277 and do all of yours.
Apologies.
We were talking about the length of this one, and this one is, I think you said 5 3/4.
Yes.
What is the angle of that?
It's across the body from left to right and.
Writing it
slightly
down
backwards.
right now.
So it's sort of came sort of from the side right here,
Yes.
correct? And was he alive at the time that this happened, or was he deceased at that time?
More likely than not alive, since there is bleeding associated with the wound.
And you're talking about this down here, the bruising that's down here, correct?
Yes.
Is this area in the belly button, is that also associated with the stab wound?
Yes, it's going across the navel.
Exhibit 189, we're now looking at the lower portion of his body, right?
Yes.
And not to be indelicate, was there any decomposition in the testicular area, that sort of part of his body?
Yeah, it's usual to see some drying there and some early mummification, and that is present. Yes.
And let's start with the right leg. What are we looking at there?
Apart from some decomposition changes, he also has some contusions or bruises on the shin area.
Right here? Is that correct?
On the right shin, yes.
Let's take a look at 191. Does that show it better?
Yes.
And the question is the same. Were these injuries here, were these inflicted at the time of death, before death, after death? Can you tell?
I believe they were inflicted before death.
Would these be consistent with this individual being dragged somewhere while he was alive?
Or
Sustained.
You're familiar, you've done
What?
how many autopsies, sir?
6,000.
And during that time, have you seen and studied the situation where someone is dragged before
Hello,
death? Have you
Ferris.
seen that situation before?
Yes,
How many times would you say?
at least 3 or 4 times.
And looking at that along with and have you read up on this area? Is there any,
No.
given what you know and what you've seen in your work, and you said that these injuries are before death, could that be consistent with someone being dragged?
Approach.
Could those be consistent with somebody being dragging him along or him being dragged?
Usually what you see in a dragging is you'll see
That
more
would be his
drawn out
family.
abrasions. These look more like impacts
His
to me
sisters.
against something. Bruising is usually from stumbling against something or being forced against something.
So in other words, these are more consistent in your view with him hitting something
Called
before
Unlock
death.
My Heart
Yes, or something
or
hitting
Free
him.
My Heart. One of the two.
How about if we then go
Just
to
kidding.
Exhibit 190, and this is the right heel or left heel?
That is the left heel.
That's
And-
gross.
What do we have here in the back of the left heel?
I call them abraded lacerations.
Oh,
So
no.
a laceration as opposed to an incised wound is actually a
Sorry.
tearing of the skin rather than cutting, and it's abraded. So there's an abrasion or a scrape leading into the laceration, and that is also from a contact with an object of some kind.
And again, were these made before or after his death?
I believe before because they are hemorrhagic.
And you said hemorrhagic, that means they were bleeding, right?
Bleeding into them, yes.
But these do imply some sort of action, correct? I mean, there was movement.
A force, yes, a blunt force.
To go back to this exhibit, which is 191, and looking at the left foot, do you see this right here? That area there by the heel?
Yes,
What is that?
that is a contusion or a bruise.
So that's also, how is that different than the abrasion that we've talked about?
A contusion or a bruise is just bleeding under the skin. The skin is intact, whereas an abrasion or a laceration, the skin is scraped or torn.
And if we look at the knee here, is that a contusion or an abrasion?
I would characterize that as an abrasion, and in contrast, the other things we've been talking about, I'd say that looks more like a post-mortem change. It's got some drying and it's kind of a yellowish in color, so it really doesn't look like an ante-mortem or an injury before death.
So this could be something after death?
Yes.
And if an individual, I know it begs the question, but if an individual is dead, they're not going to be moving around to cause this, right?
No.
Are you then telling me that actually a force was applied to this area as opposed to Mr. Alexander either moving or striking himself?
That's more likely, yes.
Let's take a look at exhibits numbers 192 through
I
195.
just don't want to re-victimize anybody. In the event, the small chance that family or friends or anybody of Travis, anybody, comes across this, I just don't want to put him through that. And you never know who's watching. You never know. So that's really why I'm trying to avoid. You know, I don't want to make this a spectacle too much. in terms of that. Okay,
Are those
we can
photographs of the victim's injuries
you know
in the
make fun of
back
her all we
area
want,
of his body when
but I just don't want to pull
examination in
that.
June of 2008?
Yes, and also some images of the head as well.
The back part
Oh
of the
boy.
head, correct?
Yes.
Move for the admission of exhibits 192 through 190.
That's the worst part probably for them, is that they're just so easy to find. It's unbelievable how easy you can find these. So
No objection, Judge.
Exhibits 192 through 199 are admitted.
Let's take a look at exhibit 192.
just not sure which ones they're bringing up.
And the injuries that jump out at us are these right here. Are you familiar with the term grouping?
Yes.
Is this a grouping of injuries?
Yes.
And what does that mean to you?
Well, more likely than not, they occurred close in time, and a lot of them, most of them, have the same orientation.
When you say that they have the same orientation, what does that mean? And I'll show you exhibit number 193. What do we mean about the same orientation?
In general, except for one exception that I can see at the lower edge, they're all oriented exactly the same direction.
And what direction is that?
They're in a diagonal extending from the right shoulder towards the lower left side of the back.
So if these were inflicted like this,
Yes.
and with one exception, which exception is that?
The lower, there's a pair of wounds. It appears that there's one that's sort of going the other direction, the other diagonal.
And these injuries that we're talking about that are coming this way like that, could they be consistent with the individual having his back, as I have it to you, turned to his attacker and the attacker just stabbing him like that?
Yes.
How many are there here? Starting with this one here, cutting across to the other shoulder, sort of in a triangular fashion, if you will. How many injuries do we have there?
We have 9 injuries, and they're all clustered together there in the center. What you're seeing on the upper left side is actually post-mortem artifact. There's some skin slippage there and some drying.
Is that what we're talking about there?
Yes.
Or in this
all
one?
of this area here where your pen is.
And also right here, I believe.
Yes.
Correct. And you said that there were how many? 9?
9.
Are these stab wounds or are they incised wounds? Which is
They're stab wounds.
So which means that they're deeper than they are longer, correct?
Yes.
How deep is the deepest one there?
They're all about the same depth. They're about 1 inch deep, and they're going into the back parts of the ribs and the spine, the spinal bone, and stopping there. And none of them, to my exam, none of them entered the chest cavity, although with decomposition, you can't completely rule that out.
When you say that they went up to these bones, does it mean that they stopped there, or did the knife blade continue past the bone? Do we know that, or does decomposition affect that?
They appear to all have been stopped by the bones.
And that does speak a little bit to the pressure that's being applied to them, right? That they didn't go through the bone, right?
It depends on the force of the assailant and also the type of weapon that's used.
And if you know, maybe you do, maybe you don't, do you know approximately how much force there was that was applied there or not?
I couldn't say. It would depend on the thickness of his bones as well. So there are a lot of variables.
But needless, they didn't go through the bone, right?
Correct.
This area here, which is his buttock area, correct?
Yes.
What's going on there? It just looks like it's a little bit red. Could you tell us what's going on there?
That's lividity. So this person was found in a semi-seated position, and the blood had settled to that part. So when the heart stops beating, the blood will settle to wherever gravity will guide it. And so in this case, since he's in a semi-seated position, most of the blood is going to go to the buttock area, and that's why it's kind of got this reddish color.
Is part of the decomposition process, does that include gases being inside the body being formed and then expelled? Is that part of the decomposition process?
Yes.
So for example, if, in this case, if we do a wound here to the neck, would it be consistent with the decomposition process to have the gases sort of be expelled through that area such that liquid or fluid may come out with the gases? Is that something that could happen?
Yes, that's usual.
Let's take a look at 194.
I don't think you're upsetting anybody.
And
I
want
appreciate your
to look at
credentials.
the right foot. Do you see that right there? That area there and perhaps this area here. Are those bruises or is that just maybe blood or discoloration?
It's discoloration and also mummification of the sole of the foot, extending up onto the
As
side.
the kids
of
would
the foot.
say, S
And the
M.
left foot, you see that
Or you
right
could just say
there?
shake my head.
I'm going to move it up. The knee area, you see that? And is that the one that we talked about that was probably post-mortem, or is that a different?
That was on the other side, but again, that has the same sort of appearance. It's not the best view, but it looks like it dried almost
Well,
like
she
a
drummed up
parchment-like
tears, didn't she?
appearance, and that's something that
Just
we
a couple.
see with after death.
And
And she turned just
The-
enough to show the jury.
left foot has the abrasion, I think you called it.
Yeah, there's a contusion on the
Okay.
ankle area, and then also that abraded area of laceration on the Achilles tendon.
Right?
Let's look at Exhibit 193 again, and we've talked about this grouping. And we see the head and the neck. Let's take a closer look at that. And Exhibit 195, what are we looking at there?
This is, after I've inspected the back of the head, I've shaved some of the hair away to better show the injuries. And what you have here are deep incised wounds, so they're longer than they are deep. But they are very deep. They're going all the way to the skull. And there's
You know what I like
two
about
of
this
them in the
courtroom?
back of the scalp.
There's literally screens
Given the
everywhere.
way you described it, and it may have been something that I
She
was reading into
cannot
it, but it
miss it.
appears that
Yep, there, she looked.
the way you described it, there was some
There it is
force
again.
that was applied to these particular wounds
Yeah.
to get to where they got.
Well, if you have a very sharp blade, it actually wouldn't take very much
I don't
force
know
at
that,
all
but
to
if
cut
somebody
cut
does
the tissue
confirm
very
or
deeply.
deny,
All
one
it
of
is
the
is
two.
just connective tissue that forms the scalp. Now, to go through the bone, that would be a lot more force that would be needed.
And this one right here, how long is that one?
I have it as 2 inches on the autopsy report.
And the one above it?
2 inches as well.
The fact that the hair is there, does that affect the strength needed to get into or get this sort of injury? Or is that just something that the hair really is not something that you deal with or think about?
His hair is very short. I mean, if he had longer, bushier hair, it might cushion the head somewhat or protect the head. But in this case, he's got short hair, so I don't think it played a role.
Taking a look at Exhibit 198, what are we looking at there?
What you actually see here are the edges, and it's only in one portion of those incised ones we saw. There was some force applied that was sufficient to cause a divot in the skull bone. So this is actually after the scalp has been reflected away from the skull. And what you're seeing here is actually a divot in the center of the skull. And then over on the left side, you see another one, and there's hemorrhage around those. So the bone was actually sort of chipped away by the end of the implement there.
If we take a look at Exhibit 199, what are we looking at there?
This to me is the tip of an implement, probably the tip of a knife or something similar, because it has this very triangular profile. This is the bone, and the piece of bone has actually been chipped away by the end of the object.
If we go back to Exhibit number 195, what this divot in Exhibit 199, where was it as it applies to these two?
Right. There's one at the extreme left end of the longer wound at the bottom,
Right here?
and then one towards the middle of the top wound.
Right here?
Yes.
So we're looking at there and we're looking at there. When we look at Exhibit number 198, you're looking at here and here.
Yes.
I pop popcorn, but I don't think this is a good time to bring it out.
Exhibit 196, the focus on the area that's down here to the bottom And also to the front, if you will, of the head. Take a look at Exhibit 197. In terms of these two injuries that we saw back there, where is this one now?
This one's actually towards the front of the head. So you're looking at the top of the head near the hairline on the forehead. And the very bottom, you'll see Mr. Alexander's eyebrow, his left eyebrow. So this is a small incised wound at the forehead near the hairline.
Any of these wounds that we've been talking about, the ones with the sharp instrument, are they any of those after death, or are they all pre-death?
I think they're all pre-death. They all have bleeding associated with them.
Let's take a look at Exhibits 200 and 201. What are we looking at there?
The right side of Mr. Alexander's neck behind the ear.
And these were also taken at the time of your examination.
Yes.
Move for the addition of Exhibits 200 and 201.
She's so perfect. Her tissues are perfect.
200 and 201 are admitted.
I actually don't know. That'd be something I'd need to look at. It may be elsewhere. Oh, that's a new angle, isn't it? We might have gotten one or two of those angles.
All of these injuries that we've taken a look at so far, how many of those have been the type that would have been fatal? Of all the ones that we've looked at so far, head, the back, and then the ones at the front.
Taken together, all the wounds of the back and the head could have been fatal from bleeding over time. The most significant wounds are going to be the neck wound, which we haven't talked about yet, the stab wound that penetrates the heart, the vein leading into the heart, and then also the gunshot wound, which we also haven't discussed.
Right, let's take a look at Exhibit 200. And what are we looking at here?
This is another stab wound of the back part of the skull behind the ear. So there's bone underneath there. It goes down into that bony area.
27 times.
And also goes into the muscle, the strap muscle that is on the side of the head below the ear.
And we're looking at 201. How big is that one?
1 1/4 inch.
Exhibit number 202. What are we looking at there?
That is the back opposite side of the neck on the left side of the neck, and that's another stab wound.
Move for the addition of Exhibit 202.
No objection.
202 is admitted.
We'll put it this way. He did not die fast enough for her. The stab wounds happened.
What do we see here?
That's another stab wound to the back left side of the neck, and that also penetrates
I'm trying to find a good way to
into,
say this, but I can't.
muscle on
But
the
she
back.
slit his throat.
And how long
He
is
did
that
not
one?
die fast enough.
1 inch.
And then she shot him. Yep.
Take a look at Exhibits 203 through 206.
I'd need to look at the timestamps on those photos because there's a photo of him in the shower and then there's a photo of him on the floor. And so you can kind of, I guess, get a general idea, but I don't have those timestamps yet.
And
So
what did they
I'll try to
portray?
look for him.
The largest wound of the neck across the throat.
Move for the addition of Exhibits 203 through 206.
No objection.
Exhibits 203 through 206 are admitted.
So when we're looking these kinds of wounds, like the one to the neck, are you able to tell, for example, if it started on the left side or the right side? Do you know by looking at these where the wound may have started or not?
I'm not able to say.
That's much better. Thank you.
Take a look at
I'm going to remember that for hopefully not next time, but
203.
next time.
Okay, what are we looking at? I guess we'll do it this way. What are we looking at here?
This is a side view of the neck wound, and it's probably one of the better views to show how deep it goes.
And how deep is this wound? What is it that was cut as this knife came through the...
Okay, referring to my autopsy report, it passes through the airway, so the windpipe is cut through.
Let me stop you there. When it passes through the airway, does this individual, as it's going through there, lose the ability to scream at that point or not?
It's below the larynx, below the voice box, so yes.
And if this person, well, this person's alive at this point, according to you, right? He was
Yes.
still alive at
Nope.
the time
Yes.
this was inflicted. Where would the blood start coming out as a result of this wound here?
Well, right next to the windpipe are the major vessels of the neck. So you've got the carotid artery, you've got the jugular vein, and on the right side, not the left, but on the right side.
Let's take a look at exhibit number 204. That's the right side, correct?
Yes. You're not going to be able to see it in this picture to any great advantage, but my examination did show
Interesting.
that the jugular vein and the carotid artery on the right side were both cut.
And looking at this, how deep is this wound that we have here?
It goes all the way back to the spine. So
Oh my
it's
Gosh.
3 inches, 4 inches.
And if a person were to have the spine cut off, is that where the feeling stops and they don't feel anything? Or
Yeah, it doesn't go through the spinal cord, so it doesn't penetrate that bone. So it's actually the soft tissue and structures of the front of the neck and then stops at the bone.
exhibit 205, what are we looking at here?
And this is a frontal view of the same wound.
In looking at this, do you see how it's, my term, scalloped?
Yes, there's some irregularity, and a lot of that is due to the drying of the wound that's happened after death. If you inspect the edges of the wound, it is actually a cleanly incised wound, and it's retracted a bit and gotten a bit larger after death because the tissue has dried and retracted away.
Are you familiar with the term hesitation marks?
Yes.
Are there, and what are hesitation marks?
Very occasionally, we'll get suicides like this. We'll get people
That
that cut their own
hit me
throat, and it's very
real
unusual for
hard.
them to just cut their throat. They will do shallow cuts, and they'll sort of do test cuts, and then they'll do a deep cut. So we call those little smaller cuts hesitation marks, and we don't see anything like that here.
Exhibit 206,
Thanks,
what
Jeff.
are you doing here?
I'm trying to show the profile of the
That's
wound a bit
pretty
better,
quick.
put the wound together so we have sort of an idea of what the wound looked like before it separated.
And see this right here? Is that an indication of where it started, or you can't tell where it started?
I can't say whether it started on the right or the left, but it's across the neck.
Once this was inflicted, what kind of wound is this? We've talked about the one that's in the chest, and you said, well, that's not immediately fatal,
Hey, Ivan.
and the person would be conscious. Once this was inflicted on Mr. Alexander, is this something that's, number one, rapidly fatal, and number two,
Yep.
what about lapsing
It was
into
her downfall.
unconsciousness? If you could have talked to us about those two
You drop that
aspects.
camera in the
Well,
washer.
he has
thing,
two
man.
major vessels
Fine.
in his throat that have been cut. He's going to lose a great deal of blood very quickly. He's going to lose consciousness within seconds likely, and then die a few minutes later.
So if an individual receives this wound, would he be able to get up and walk, let's say, 12 feet 6 inches somewhere?
Yes,
He
he
could
could
do
get
that.
up and walk a couple of feet. That's possible. He could move,
And
yes,
then he would,
collapse.
and in terms of unconsciousness, so how much time are we talking about?
Literally the best.
A few seconds, probably.
And death, how long would it take for this person to die if this was the only injury?
If this was the only injury, again, probably a few minutes.
In this case, though, you've seen that there were other injuries, and you also alluded to the fact that there was a gunshot wound, right?
Yes,
Take a look at exhibits 207 through 210. And what do those deal with?
They show the gunshot wound of Mr. Alexander's right forehead.
And we also have the bullet. Did you recover it?
Yes.
Move for the admission of exhibits numbers 207 through 210.
That's 207 through 210 are admitted.
Exhibit 207. What is this right here?
That's a gunshot entrance wound.
And what's the trajectory of this gunshot wound?
It passes down through the skull, passes through the face and downward and to the left, and terminates in the left cheek.
In looking at this, are you able to tell or give us a determination as to the distance between the muzzle and his temple?
I'm not. I called it an indeterminate range. I don't have sooting. I don't have stippling, any of the indicators of a range of fire here.
So we really can't tell how far away it was.
That's right.
And 208 just shows us that same injury with the ruler next to it, right?
Yes.
Exhibit 209, what do we see there?
That is the left cheek, and I've made an incision and removed the bullet here.
This bullet and the trajectory that you've described, did it affect the brain at all? In other words, did it strike the brain or not?
It must have. It passed through the front right portion of the skull. The problem in this case is that the brain is decomposed, and the brain is a very soft structure to begin with, so it falls apart very rapidly after death. So I was not able to see a track through the brain, but just because the bullet passes through the front part of the skull where the brain normally would be, I have to conclude that the brain was perforated.
And if the brain is perforated, what would happen to this individual once he was shot?
He'd be incapacitated.
Went down?
Yes.
Immediately?
Rapidly, yes.
Exhibit 210 is what?
That's the bullet after recovery.
Let me show you exhibit 244. If you want, go ahead and open it. If you need that, you know, I'll get you a bigger glove there. I'll get you some scissors.
Do I need to view it, or you prefer that I did?
Yeah, let me go ahead and get you some scissors.
This is the evidence canister, which would be containing that projectile that was recovered. And those are my initials.
All right, if you don't mind putting it back. I move for the admission of exhibit 244.
No objection.
244 is admitted.
So how did Mr. Alexander die? What was the mechanism of death? In other words,
Yep.
how did he die?
Primarily blood loss.
And
So, yep.
tell me how that works on the body in terms of the blood loss and what that does to the individual as he dies.
Well, after you lose blood, you lose the ability to provide oxygen to your major organs, including your brain and your heart. In this case, the first thing that would happen would be dizziness, followed by loss of consciousness, and then death.
In this particular case, you've indicated that there are three specific injuries that could have led to death. We talked about the stab wound in the chest, We've talked about the slitting of the throat, and then we've talked about the shot to the head. With regard to the shot to the head, would that have been rapidly fatal?
Likely would have been, yes.
And by rapidly fatal, what are we talking about?
Well, if you have a projectile going through the front part of the brain, the person may not die immediately, but they'll probably lose the ability to function normally. They'll lose consciousness and they'll be laying on the floor.
Very short order. In other
Yes.
words, shot, they go down.
Yes.
How about the slashing to the throat in terms of whether or not it's rapidly fatal or not?
I think by far it's the most significant injury. And would have
And
been
why do you
most-
say that?
Well, it's just the most hemorrhagic injury. It's the one that I can demonstrate the most significant injury to the structures that are going to cause death, like the carotid artery, the windpipe, and the jugular vein.
And then the one to the heart, is that, I think we've talked about it, but in terms of rapidly fatal, less fatal, which of these, if we're going to apply that standard as to which are the most fatal, how about the one to the chest? Is that the most fatal or the least fatal? Which may not be.
Probably the middle. It's a significant injury. It would definitely cause death without medical attention.
And would that cause unconsciousness immediately?
Yes. Not immediately. Not the chest wound, no.
From what I'm hearing you say, of the three that we've talked about, two of them, the one to the neck and the one to the gunshot to the head, those appear, from what I hear you saying, that those would cause unconsciousness quickly, immediately.
Yes.
And the one to the chest would not.
Less likely.
So if that's the scenario, and in this case, we have the defensive wounds to the hands, what does that tell you about the sequencing of these three injuries?
I believe the wounds to the hands must have occurred before the fatal injuries, either of the head or of the throat.
And so what you're saying is that at some point during the stabbing, but before the slashing of the throat and before the gunshot to the head, this individual grabbed the knife.
Or attempted to.
Or the knife was applied.
Objection, leading.
Rephrase.
Tell me about the sequencing of events as it applies to the two injuries, and one to the head and the slitting of the throat, and when this individual may have grabbed the knife or the knife was applied to his hands.
With the throat wound and the head wound, I don't think this person could have had a purposeful activity, meaning I don't think they could have raised their arms and attempted to defend themselves. With the chest wound, that's possible because he would not have been immediately unconscious.
In terms then between the other two, so that would mean then that it would appear that, in your opinion, the first wound would have been the one to the chest.
Objection, leading.
Rephrase.
Which one would have been first in your opinion?
Well, the stab wound could have occurred, and then the defensive injuries could have happened after the wound to the chest occurred.
Right, okay. And then in terms of the sequence of the injuries involving the three major ones that we talked about, what is your opinion?
Well, the throat injuries and or the head wound are going to be immediately incapacitating, and he's not going to attempt to defend himself after that.
Okay, in terms of the shot to the head, do you have any opinion as to whether or not he was alive at the time that that shot was struck?
I can't say.
Do you have an opinion as to the wound to the neck, whether or not he was alive at the time that that was rendered, if you will?
I believe he was. There's a great deal of hemorrhage associated with that.
And was he alive with regard to the one to the chest that we've been talking about?
Yes, I believe he was.
Can you tell with regard to the gunshot wound to the right temple whether or not he was alive or not at that point?
Again, there's a wound going through the head, and I don't see hemorrhage in the brain. I can't see a wound track through the brain. So all I know is that there's a bullet going through the brain. So I can't say with certainty.
And if we don't see hemorrhaging or bleeding, as you talked about, is that an indication that the person was already dead?
They may have been, yes.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Horn.
Good afternoon.
Oh, we get to see her cross.
Okay. So you're obviously the doctor that performed the autopsy on Mr. Alexander, right?
Yes,
And were you the only doctor that did that?
yes.
And present during the autopsy was Detective Flores, right?
I have, again, referring to my autopsy report, Detective Barrientos and Detective Flores were present.
And that's Detective Flores here sitting at the prosecution's table?
Yes.
Okay. And so, and when they're present, that means they are able to watch what you're doing?
Yes.
And if they had a question, they can always ask you?
Yes.
And if you had, they're there to collect evidence too, right?
Yes.
And if you had something or you noted something, you can certainly tell the detectives, right?
Yes.
I don't know how they didn't know, but
And there was
they
no
didn't know.
issues. I mean, he was free to ask you questions if he had any.
Yes.
After the autopsy,
It's all the pirates.
he would have been free, the Detective Barrientos or Detective Flores would have been free to call you if they had follow-up questions, right?
Yes.
I mean, in other words, you don't just do this autopsy and then forget about it.
That's right.
Okay. And so, and you certainly would take Detective Flores' calls if he called you.
Yes, I would.
And in fact, at some point you did speak to Detective Flores later, didn't you?
I may have. I don't recall.
Okay. Well, he's considered what we call a case agent. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
And that means that he is like the point person for the investigation, right?
I believe so.
As far as the police agency, if you had needed to say anything, it would be Detective Flores or the case agent that you would say it to.
Right, or if I needed further information, I would contact that detective, yes.
Okay. And he was always open to you as far as you know, right?
As far as I know.
Okay. Now, during this autopsy, you learned that, I think you said that Mr. Alexander was 5'9".
Yes.
And at the time of the autopsy, the weight was 189.
Yes.
And if you need to refer to your report, just let me know.
Thank you.
The 189 pounds, I believe that would be during the autopsy. So more likely in life, he weighed more than that. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you have any type of an opinion about how much more he would typically weigh?
I would go by his driver's license or recollections of family. I don't have that information.
Okay. But we do know that at the point of an autopsy, especially when somebody's lost blood, they're going to weigh less than what they did in life.
Yes.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the gunshot wound, okay?
Yes.
All right. Now, we looked at the pictures, and from the pictures, it looks as though the gunshot wound, the gunshot goes in, there's an entry. Well, you're familiar with an entry wound, what that means, right?
Yes.
And an exit wound?
Yes. There is no exit wound in this case.
Okay, and an exit wound is when a projectile is leaving the body.
Yes.
Okay, so there's an entry wound right above his right brow, is that right?
Yes.
And just in the middle of his brow, just above it, actually.
It's above it, yes.
Okay, and you said there's no exit wound.
No exit wound.
So that means that during the autopsy, you recovered the projectile in his left cheek, right?
Yes.
Or correct, I should say. And it was in, we know that the trajectory, which is the pathway of the bullet, right? That's what
It's the direction.
The direction. So we know that the direction of the bullet, based on where it went in and where it lodged, we know that it was coming in from the left and going down.
Coming in from the right and going down and ending up on the left side.
I'm sorry, heading left.
Heading left, yes.
Okay, right. Coming in from the right-hand side, heading in the direction of left, and then lodging in the left cheek.
Yes.
Okay. And it was coming in a downward position, right?
It may have been deflected by the bone since it's passing through the skull. So its position in the cheek may not be the actual trajectory at the beginning of its path.
Okay. So, and you know, I would assume from being a doctor, I've always heard that head wounds bleed. The scalp is something that bleeds a lot. Is that true?
Yes, scalp wounds do bleed.
Okay, so a head wound, a bullet entry wound on the scalp, just above, or not the scalp, but just above in the forehead. Is that something that's going to have a lot of blood associated with it typically?
In a living person, yes.
Okay, and so if this bullet wound is made while Mr. Alexander's living, there's going to be blood coming out of it, right?
Yes.
And it would be, of course, in the pictures, we just see a small little hole, but when it actually happened, if Mr. Alexander was living, there would have been quite a bit of blood coming from there.
Generally, yes. Depends on what other wounds have happened.
Okay.
So if the throat's already been cut and he's already been bleeding from that wound, then there might be considerably less blood from that wound.
Okay. Assuming, though, that Mr. Alexander was alive at the time that the gunshot wound is done, so the heart is still pumping, that in that situation, you'd agree, right, that there would be lots of blood coming from the gunshot wound?
In that abstract sense, yes.
Okay. And then the left cheek, the projectile lodging in the left cheek, that's something that would typically cause bleeding, wouldn't it?
Wherever it is along its path, it's going to cause bleeding along the path. So yes, there would be bleeding into the cheek, there'd be bleeding into the forehead and into the skull intervening.
Okay. And in the cheek where you were able to recover the projectile, that would be something that, had Mr. Alexander been alive, that blood would be going from his cheek and probably into his mouth, wouldn't it?
I don't have any evidence that it passed through his mouth. So if it's actually going through, and when I say cheek, I mean, I do mean this bone up here, the maxilla, which is really not connected to the oral cavity except by the sinus. So I'm not saying that it went through his oral cavity.
Okay, so you're talking about it being lodged in the cheekbone?
Cheekbone or beyond the cheekbone, up here in the soft tissue above where the mouth is.
Okay, and you said that's connected to the mouth through the sinus?
Right, there's a
cavity?
maxillary sinus, right.
All right, so if there was bleeding associated with that, then would we expect to see blood into the sinus or through the nose and then eventually into the mouth?
It's likely, yes.
All right, and you talked about the pathway. Well, let me ask you this. You talked a little bit on direct about not knowing the distance from the muzzle of the gun to Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
So when you're talking about that, you're really talking about things like stippling, right?
Stippling or soot.
Soot.
Deposits on the
Brandy's
skin.
done a great
Right.
job.
Okay. Can you tell us what stippling is?
Stippling is sometimes out of the end of a firearm. If the person's close enough when they're being shot, you'll have little pieces of burning gunpowder that will come out of the end of the gun and will embed themselves in the skin. And so you'll get these little tiny dots, little stipple marks around the wound. And when we see that, we usually say that's an intermediate range of fire. And it depends on the type of firearm you're using, but it may be a couple of feet away or maybe up to a yard away, depending on what gun is used.
Okay, so when you see stippling, that tells you it's that the muzzle of the gun was probably within 2 to 3 feet away from the person?
Depending on the gun. So some can be considerably further away, some can be closer than that and leave stippling. So what you'd have to do is actually get the gun and test fire it.
Okay. Now, when you talk about stippling and it leaving marks, those are actual burn marks, aren't they?
There are abrasions and there may be some burn to that, but most of the time it's an abrasion and it's a piece of gunpowder that's embedding itself in the skin.
Okay, and those abrasions, they're not just going to go away if somebody were to pour water over them, right?
No, they're embedded in the skin.
So we know that Mr. Alexander's body was found in the shower and that it appeared that there was water at some point put over his body. That's not going to get rid of any stippling, right?
It may wash out some of the gunpowder fragments, but the marks, the stipple marks would still be there generally.
All right, and you're confident that you would be able to know that, right? From your experience?
Well, with decomposition, it may be less apparent, but in looking at him and looking at his face, I didn't see any stipple marks.
All right, and so based on the fact that there's no stippling marks, you can say, I know you talk about an indeterminate range of fire, right?
Yes.
And that means, what does that mean to you?
That means I couldn't determine a range of fire.
Okay.
Based on the autopsy alone.
Okay. But because there's no stippling, doesn't it also mean that we know that the gun certainly wasn't next to his forehead?
I don't think it's a contact wound. A contact wound will usually leave like a star-shaped tear, and I don't see that here. If it's not right up against the skin, but if it's very close, you usually see soot and not stippling. I don't see soot. I don't see a star-shaped tear, and I don't see stippling. So that, for me, takes it out beyond the range of an intermediate. So it's either a distant range or indeterminate. An indeterminate range of fire could be that there's some object in between the face and the gun. So if there's a garment, a towel, something like that, that can also cause you to be unable to determine a range of fire.
All right. And so you know that we're talking at least 2 to 3 feet away, if not more, because of the no stippling.
That's likely.
Okay. I want to talk to you a little bit about the wounds on the back, okay? All in all, on the back, there was 9 wounds. Is that correct? Not on, I'm sorry, in the upper back. Let me be more specific.
Yes, a cluster of 9 stab wounds on the upper back.
And I think that's what you called a grouping?
Yes.
And they're in between his shoulders, is that right?
Yes.
And these wounds, you'd consider very shallow, is that right?
They are shallow, yes.
And I'm going to show you what's in evidence as 193.
I'm learning me something.
All right, that's 193, and that's a picture of the wounds in between the shoulders, the grouping on the back, right?
Yes.
All right, and you see that there's a center. There's these in the center, right?
Yes.
This group, and then there's 3 here to his right shoulder, more towards his right shoulder, I should say.
Yes.
Now the group in the center, those actually are more of a straight on direction, aren't they?
They appear to be straight, yes. Okay. There's about equal amount of tissue on either side.
All right, so in other words, those are not, the ones that are, the grouping in the center, those are not a diagonal, as far as you can tell, diagonal incoming.
Well, I think we got off on a sidetrack on direct, that the directionality, like the way that they're oriented is in a diagonal, but the track itself going into the tissue is pretty much straight on. Okay, so when you talk about direction of diagonal, you're talking about that the wound itself is diagonal.
Vertical, up and down.
Right.
Okay. And so directionality, when we talk about directionality, we're talking about where the instrument might have been coming from.
Yes, in terms of a trajectory.
Yes, okay. So in terms of the trajectory, we're looking at the center and the back, and those look like the instrument would have been coming more of a straight on. Is that right?
More straight on from back to front, yes.
Okay. And the grouping on the right,
I don't like her as much
we can see those look more like they are coming at a diagonal.
Yeah.
The trajectory would be diagonal.
Right. If you look at the tissue on the side, you can see that whitish tissue in the margin, and you're seeing fatty tissue that is being sort of shaved as the knife is going in. So when I look at these 3 wounds here, it looks like the knife is actually going in from a little bit from right to left and into the back.
Okay. So from right to left. So going in from his right shoulder heading towards his middle. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And you already talked about these wounds being shallow. When you see shallow wounds, that would typically mean that there's less force applied, right?
Well, it depends on what the object is that's being penetrated. In this case, there's lots of bone underneath these. So whatever force was applied was insufficient to break through a rib or break through into the spine.
Okay. Well, if you assume that the same instrument is used for all these different wounds, we know that some of these wounds are deeper than others, right?
Yes.
And for example, the wound that penetrates into and perforates the vena cava, that one.
Yes.
Right? The one that hits the vein that leads to the heart.
Yes.
That one was much deeper, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. And so typically, and that had to go through cartilage also.
Yes.
And so that one would require more force, wouldn't it?
More than just going through soft tissue or fat, yes.
Okay. And in these instances, the wounds on the back, those ones, you didn't see
like,
any
really,
chipping of the bone or anything like that.
No.
And you'd agree, wouldn't you, that if somebody were standing and they were, if the 2 people were standing facing each other and the person with the knife is reaching over the back, that's going to have less force to it, wouldn't it, than somebody who's standing behind and being able to drive the knife right in without stop?
Generally, I'd agree with that, yes.
Okay. All right, so the wound to the one that we were just talking about, to the vena cava. In the pictures we saw that there's, it was basically in the middle of below his chest, right?
Lower right chest, yes.
Okay. And that one you said would eventually be fatal without medical attention.
Yes.
And that's due to blood loss?
Yes.
That wound, you were able to tell a direction or a trajectory on that wound, right?
Yes, it's pretty much straight into the chest cavity from the right side of the chest.
Okay, doesn't it have a slightly upward trajectory?
If it is, it's very slight because the heart is right, the vena cava is right in that location where the wound is.
Oh, she lost her jacket.
Well, doesn't it have, and I don't know, let me know if you need to see a picture, but doesn't it have an undetermined lower edge so that it's going to be a slightly upper trajectory as it's going in?
Undetermined, I don't know
Lower edge?
what you mean by undetermined lower edge.
Okay.
Undermined?
Undermined, I'm sorry.
Undermined, yes. Well, that would indicate that the blade is angled slightly upward as it's going into the skin. So if you see more tissue on the lower part than the upper part, then that's consistent with that. But we also
Dean,
have to
I
keep in
missed you,
mind that this
man.
is a decomposed person. So the characters of the wounds can change a bit.
Okay, but based on what you saw, you would say that based on the what you were just talking about, the undermined edge,
Undermining,
based on that, you can tell us that more than likely it was going in an upper trajectory, right?
generally that's true, yes.
Okay, and that means it's going from down to up.
I think it was self-defense.
Yes,
I think
as
she
the
was
tip
saying
of the
that
wound, as the tip of the weapon is going
He
into the
started
body,
it,
it has a
but
slightly upward
I-
trend to it, yes.
Okay,
yeah.
and that can happen when somebody is taller than the person who has the knife,
But then she
right?
also came up
You
with
have to
the
reach
idea
up.
that there were ninjas in the house,
In a general way, yes, that's true.
and there were
Okay.
people, and oh, good grief.
And you said that one,
What gender reveals are you going to, Brandi? Good grief. That is not a gender
but
reveal.
that one is mostly straight in as far as it's,
That
in
I wanna
other
be
words,
part
it's
of.
not diagonal coming from the right or the left. Is that correct?
The vena cava is slightly on the right side of the body, the right side of the chest, so it's right underneath where the stab wound goes in. So it's
Okay.
essentially straight in and maybe with a slightly upward trajectory.
Okay. Dr. Horn, I know you haven't seen that photo prior to today, is that right?
No, I haven't.
Okay. In that photo, can you see a person's head
I think so.
and a shoulder
Yes.
and what appears to be an arm?
Yes.
And then at the very back portion of the picture, and you can tell it's
No.
a distance because it's small,
Just
is
really
a foot, right?
crappy
Could be a foot.
outside.
I'm going to ask you to assume that
Ultimately,
that
yes.
picture is of
Yep.
Mr. Alexander, okay?
Okay.
And Judge, I was going to ask to publish to the jury for demonstrative purposes.
And the exhibit number for the record?
192?
162.
160.
And Judge, I would move it into evidence, 162.
Oh, God.
Any objection?
No objection.
162 is admitted and you may publish.
I'm a gym ninja. You'll never see me there. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
Okay, so what we were
Absolutely
talking
true.
about is here you can see what appears to be a head, right?
Yes.
All right, and this appears to be an arm.
I think so. Yes.
Okay, and then this would be somebody's shoulder.
Yes.
And then the very distant part of the picture, you can see what appears to be a foot.
Yes.
So in this picture, it would appear to be somebody lying down almost on the floor, right? It appears that the person is lying
I
down.
think if this is tile here, yes, that would be him laying on his back.
Okay. And you can see what would appear to be blood, right?
Yes.
Something that's dripping over his shoulder.
Thank
Yes.
you.
And that would be the person's right shoulder, wouldn't it?
Yes.
My kids only ever validated my
And
joke.
also in this
I
picture,
always
the
had
arm is
same
up,
dad
isn't it?
Jokes.
It looks like it's flexed up. Yes.
Okay, so in other words, it's not just laying limp on the floor, right?
Right.
Okay. And the head is also up, right?
Not
Yes, except
John
that I
Thomas.
don't know what this blue
Promise
object
you
is,
that.
if it's something that the head's resting against or what this is in the foreground.
Does this appear to be like a foot and then a pant leg?
Could be.
Okay. But from what you can tell from the shoulder is definitely off the ground, isn't it?
I think so.
Okay. And assume for a second if this is Mr. Alexander, once the wound to the neck occurs, having his head up and his arm up, certainly his head up, that would be near impossible, wouldn't it?
Well, like I said, he's going to have a few seconds of consciousness, and it's certainly enough. If he's laying on the ground to raise an arm or raise a head, that wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility.
But unlikely, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that, no. I wouldn't think he'd be getting up and walking around, but picking your head up or moving your arm is not impossible.
Okay. And you can see the blood coming over the shoulder, right?
Yes.
And if there was a neck wound at this point, wouldn't you expect to see quite a bit more blood than that?
I don't see what's underneath him. That seems to be a lot of blood to me, but I have no way of quantifying or telling how much is here,
Okay.
just based on this photo.
Okay. But we do know that the blood is on the right-hand side, right?
Yes.
And we can tell that, at least from the picture, it looks like the blood is dripping down the back. In other words,
you
it's like
can't
a
laugh
drip,
now.
isn't it?
Nope.
Right. There's a large area of blood going back, and there's some dripping on either side of that large area of blood.
Okay. And we do know for sure that the gunshot wound was to his right side, wasn't it?
Yes.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about the gunshot wound. Let's see. And we know with the gunshot wound, obviously you discuss it in your examination
paying
report,
for it?
right?
Yes.
Who's paying for it?
And you talk about the track of the bullet begins in the frontal skull, is that right?
Yes.
And when you refer to the frontal skull, you're referring to a bone.
Yes, the frontal bone of the
Okay.
skull.
And we know that it ends in the facial skeleton near the left cheek.
Yes.
And again, as you told me earlier, the facial skeleton, you're referring to a bone.
Right, the maxillary bone.
All right. Now, in your reports, and let me just ask you, you did this report, actually, you did the autopsy on June 12th of 2008, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So on June 12th of 2008, after doing your report, you found
For those of you who are just joining us, this is kind of how we handle
that there was
difficult
no
stuff.
evidence, no gross evidence of significant
Certainly
intracranial
not
hemorrhage. Is that right?
disrespectful, but definitely helps relieve the tension.
And I'm looking on
Yes.
page 4.
respectfully.
Yes, page 4 of my report.
Okay. And when you talk about significant intracranial hemorrhage, you're talking about bleeding
I see what
through
you
the
did
brain.
there.
Is that right?
Right. And at this point, the brain is really non-existent. It's almost, you can't
never
examine it.
thought
It's
of that.
become liquid.
You can't examine it at all?
It's very difficult.
Okay, well, but didn't you actually take slices of the brain? And I'm referring to page 7.
I won't accept that one.
Yes, so it is softened, it's not liquefied.
Okay.
It is still present, but it's softened.
All right, so you were able,
Stole my
it's still
nickname.
there, right?
Yes, it's always there. It's just the state that it's in.
Okay, so the state that it was in, though, is that you were able to actually take what's called autolyzed brain, multiple serial sections of autolyzed brain.
Right, so the autolysis or autolyzed, that's a term that refers to the liquefied brain tissue or very softened brain tissue.
Okay, and when you talk about multiple serial sections, does that mean that you're taking slices of the brain to look through it?
As best I can, I'm running a knife through the brain and trying to examine it. But
Okay.
that may be actual sections or may just be in terms of trying to inspect the internal parts of that tissue, whatever's there.
Okay. But according to your
How I was nicknamed.
report, that's what you did, right?
Right.
Just so
And
happened
in
that
there,
it worked.
so in this part of your report, after going through these sections, again, you say it does not reveal the presence of grossly apparent trauma. Is that right?
Right.
So by taking through these sections, again, you don't find any evidence of trauma or like a bullet track through the brain.
Nothing so clearly defined. No hemorrhage, no foreign bodies, no metal fragments. Right.
Okay.
I have a story about that actual nickname. I do.
And we know that people who have had injuries to their brains, depending on the section of the brain, they're not always incapacitated. Isn't that true?
For the most part, if you have a bullet pass through the brain, you're not going to be standing, you're not going to be functional, you're going to fall. And like I said earlier in direct, it may not be immediately fatal. In fact, it likely wasn't. Passing through the frontal part of the brain, especially, it's not as vital. I mean, they're all vital structures, but it's not as vital as the brain stem or the back parts of the brain.
Well, just so we're clear, you don't actually have any medical evidence of it passing through the brain, right?
It had to have passed through the brain.
You don't have any medical evidence of that, do you?
I do. The skull is perforated where the brain is, so it had to have passed through the brain. The brain is there.
But you have no idea, you have no medical evidence of how far or what part of the brain it exactly would have hit, right?
It would have passed through the right frontal lobe.
Uh-huh.
I just don't have any evidence of hemorrhage now because of decomposition. But it had to have passed through the brain because of the part of the skull that was injured. The brain in a young person especially is flush against that structure. The brain occupies the entire skull. So to have a hole in the skull here and an exit in here, it has to pass through the brain.
Well, the exit's there's no exit. What do you?
Exit from the skull cavity into the face.
Uh-huh. So, but what you're saying though is you have no idea where that bullet might have hit. It could have just grazed the tip of the brain, right?
No, it had to have passed through the right frontal lobe of the brain based on where these holes in the skull are.
And
There's no way it could have avoided the brain.
Okay, and you're sure of that?
Yes.
He is so frustrated right now.
What I was talking about earlier was that with brain injuries, I mean, we've all heard the stories of the person who had the arrow went through his skull and hit his brain, or the person who had I don't know if it was an arrow or what, but actually goes through the brain, and these people are coming to the ER.
Right.
You've heard those stories, right?
Those are different.
Okay, but those are people who've had brain injuries, right?
Not with projectiles.
Okay.
With firearms, you don't just have an arrow or an object passing through the head. With a firearm, you also have gas and you have an expansile cavity that damages the brain as it goes through. So you can shoot an arrow through the brain. It's a much lower velocity projectile and will not cause a large temporary cavity to open up in the brain tissue like a projectile would, like a firearm projectile would.
So those don't cause as much damage as a bullet does, is what
That's
you're
right.
saying?
That's right.
But you didn't see any damage, even in your slices, right?
Right. I could not document the damage because of the decomposition.
Your findings during the autopsy, that would be something that you would explain to Detective Flores, right?
Preliminarily, yes.
Okay.
Sit
And
down,
he's going to get a
Jennifer
copy of
Wilmot.
it?
A copy of my final report.
No
Yes.
relation
Yes.
to Lisa.
All right. And like you said before, he's free to call you with questions if he doesn't know what you mean by something.
Yes.
And do you remember speaking to Detective Flores about
Hi, Rainbow Bragg.
close to a year later after the
I love the
autopsy?
name.
No.
Do you remember speaking to Detective Flores ever again?
No.
Do you think you didn't? Or do you just not remember?
I don't recall. No.
Do you have any memory of ever speaking to Detective Flores about this particular autopsy after June 12th?
No.
So then any information that Detective Flores would have gotten from you would have been from June 12th of 2008, is that right?
I have no idea.
Well, I mean, you spoke to him on June 12th, right?
I assume so. He's listed as present on my report, but I don't remember him being there.
Okay. And you said you've done 6,000 or so autopsies?
Something like that.
All right. And when police are involved, police have been present during your autopsies, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it makes it difficult. I'm sure they run together, do they not?
Yes.
But you know in your report that Detective Flores was there. You know that from, because it was documented.
Just, yes, the documentation.
All right.
That one just sounds dirty. I don't know why.
And so the information about,
And he makes noises
let's talk about
too.
the gunshot wound first. So any information that Detective Flores had about the gunshot wound, I guess then would have come from June 12th, right? If you don't remember ever talking to him again.
Objection, speculation is for Detective Flores. May I take this information?
Overruled, you may answer.
Sorry, can you ask it again?
You're the only doctor who did this autopsy, right?
Correct.
And so any information that Detective Flores has about the autopsy itself would have come from you, right?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Any information would have come from the autopsy that you did.
Objection, speculation, and as to what information she's talking about.
Sustained.
She said, Ooh,
You
look at
provided
that look.
your report to Detective Flores,
Holy
right?
criminy.
Not myself personally,
Did
but my
everybody
office would
straighten
have
up in
mailed
their
it to
chair?
him.
Yes, it goes to the police department, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Isn't it true that at some point you told Detective Flores that you believed the first wound was the shot to the head?
I don't recall ever saying that.
So you think you never told Detective Flores that?
I don't think that's consistent with the evidence that I have, and I don't remember ever saying anything like that.
Don't wish that
Okay,
on me.
so what your testimony is, I just want to be clear, is that you never told Detective Flores that the gunshot wound was the first wound.
I don't believe I ever said that, no.
And do you remember telling Detective Flores that you knew this because the gunshot wound wouldn't have completely incapacitated somebody?
I don't recall saying that either.
Is that something that you think you would have never said to Detective Flores?
I think I've said it here in court that I don't think it would immediately incapacitate him or kill him, but it would be a serious injury. But I don't recall telling Detective Flores that, no.
Okay, so let me back up for a second. So you're saying that the gunshot wound is not immediately incapacitating?
I would say not immediately fatal.
Okay,
But I
I'm not
think-
talking about fatal, I'm just talking about incapacitating.
I think, yes, I think that it would be
Incapacitated.
incapacitating, passing through his brain, so yes.
Okay, so, and that's assuming it passed through his brain. You would say it's incapacitating, right?
I'm saying it did pass through his brain.
All right. And so, so then you wouldn't have told Detective Flores that that particular gunshot wound would not have completely incapacitated someone, right? I guess you wouldn't have said that.
I don't recall having a conversation with the detective at all about anything.
I'm sorry, I missed the last
I don't recall having a conversation with the detective at all about this case.
Okay. So do you remember then telling Detective Flores that Mr. Alexander could have been unconscious, but then you suspect that he became conscious again?
No, I don't recall saying that.
Okay, and you suspect that he became conscious, or that you knew he was conscious because there's defensive wounds?
Well, I think you'd have to be conscious during the defensive wounds. I don't recall telling Detective Flores that.
Okay. But if the gunshot wound comes first, and then the defensive wounds
Oh.
come after that, obviously he would have to be conscious for that.
I see.
I don't think that makes sense. I don't think he got the gunshot wound and then got defensive wounds. I think he would have been unconscious.
Okay, so that's something you never told Detective Flores?
Again, I don't recall ever having a conversation with him about anything.
If you're going to ask him about this, you need to bring up a transcript. Like, you can't just say that and then not prove it. It makes no sense. Why? What's the point? What is this line of questioning?
So if you don't recall ever having a conversation with Detective Flores, and we know that Detective Flores was at the autopsy, right?
Right.
So then can we assume then that you never spoke to him again?
That was 10 years ago. I don't remember.
It wasn't 10 years ago, it was in 2008.
2, 6,
4.5.
several years ago.
Okay,
I
so you don't
don't
remember.
recall speaking to him again, no.
So then
No,
it's
you can't
possible that you
math
spoke to
either. I feel
Detective
better.
Flores.
Sure.
Okay. And it's then possible that you might have said these things to Detective Flores.
I don't believe I would say those things, no. I don't think they're consistent with what I'm saying here.
Okay. And so,
I wish she was lurking in that bush rather than beating it to death. Good grief.
I guess the one thing we can agree on is that the wound to the neck, that one was most certainly fatal the quickest, right?
Yes, that's the most significant wound in my opinion, yes.
Okay. Do you remember giving your opinion to Detective Flores that the cut to the throat was the last wound?
No,
And so if Detective Flores would have testified in some other hearing that that's what you told him, he's wrong?
Objection, vouching speculation.
Sustained.
I take it you have no memory of discussing the scene photographs with Detective Flores?
I don't, no.
And in discussing the scene photographs with Detective Flores, telling Detective Flores that the gunshot wound would not have completely incapacitated Mr. Alexander?
Again, I've been answering this question. I do not have any recollection of that, no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Where was she
Sir,
going with that?
In terms of the sequencing of the wounds, do you remember having an interview with this individual sitting here with the glasses? Do you remember having an interview with him?
Vaguely, I do remember the defense interview.
You were interviewed with regard to this case, right?
Yes,
And you have a copy of that interview, don't you?
I do.
That's not even
And you
funny.
were asked about the sequencing of these injuries, weren't
No,
you?
thank you.
Yes,
Sustained.
All right, did you talk to them about
She
the
didn't even sit
sequencing
down
of the
yet.
injuries?
yes.
And at any time, did you stop the interview and say, no, I don't want to talk to you about the sequencing of the injuries?
No,
And were you asked about the sequencing of the injuries?
yes.
And what did you tell them during that interview that you had with them?
That I felt that the gunshot wound may have been last, but at any event, the gunshot wounds and the wounds to the neck would have had to have come after the defensive wounds of the hands.
Many things. Many
And is that what you told us
It
today?
changed.
Yes.
Now, sir, with regard to the procedure or the process that takes place when a body is brought in terms of when you conduct the examination, who is in the room with you?
Forensic technicians, photographers, sometimes medical students.
Do you take the photographs?
No,
In terms of the individuals from law enforcement, you indicated that they're there via your report, right?
yes, they're in an observation area.
But in terms of the examination room itself, is the detective there looking over your shoulder and questioning you as you conduct this examination? Is that how it's done out there?
No,
Where are they, physically speaking, the detective, when this examination is going on?
they're in an observation bay separated by glass.
And if they want to talk to you during this particular process, how does that work? In other words, if they want to provide you advice as to whether or not an injury went through the brain or not, how is it that they provide this advice to you?
They don't generally.
But if they do want to talk to you, how does it happen?
They have a handset they can pick up and I can hear them in the autopsy area. And then I will come to the door or the window and I'll talk to them.
And as you're conducting this examination, is it your practice to immediately form an opinion as to which injury is first, which is second, and which is third, if there's three of them?
No,
Why not? Why would you not immediately tell them, oh, I know this one's the first one, this one's the second one, this is the third one? Why wouldn't you do it that way?
well, often we can never establish that, but I do want to have an opportunity to look at the whole case, get investigative reports back, get toxicology, histology, and then come to a final report.
And this report that you prepare, when is it due? In other words, how long does it take you to prepare this report with your impressions?
Varies, minimum of a month, maximum of 4 to 5 months,
In
depending.
this case, I think you conducted the autopsy, June 16th, I think?
June 12th,
June 12th? And what date is your report dated?
July 15th,
And how many, so that's roughly what, a month later?
5 weeks. So, yeah.
And how many pages is your report?
No receipts. None.
8 pages.
And in that report, is there any
Less.
place that indicates that the gunshot wound or which injury was first or last? Anywhere does it indicate that?
No,
In terms of you being asked about the sequence of events, in terms of these fatal injuries, when, according to your records, was the first time that you were asked about the sequencing of events?
According to my recollection, it would have been at the defense interview.
And before that, you didn't write it in your
Him and-
report, right?
That's
Him and
right.
a latent fingerprint
And
person from last
Is it your
from,
practice to write the
Wednesday.
sequencing of events in your report?
No,
Why not?
it would be speculative. And I am simply providing information about the injuries that I see.
And then once you've had a chance to have all this information before you, that's when you make your determination then, right?
Yes.
You were asked about this photograph here, which is exhibit number 162. Let me have it marked since it is evidence.
He is fantastic at just pushing
One of the things that
his voice.
you weren't able to
Just-
see is
Fantastic.
there's a date and time associated with that, correct?
Yes.
What is the date, if you can see it, and time?
June 4th, 2008, 5:32 in the evening,
16 seconds, right?
16 seconds.
Yep.
And it does show a head, right?
Yes.
And you were asked over and over not whether this was a foot. Do you remember that?
Yes.
If that were a human being's foot, would you have any problem saying that perhaps this human being had another foot if they were a normal human being?
No.
And would you have any problem saying that this individual, if he had 2 feet, would also have 2 arms?
Yes.
Well, you would know that they would, right?
Yes.
Do you know whether or not the right arm, the left arm, do you know what that right or left arm is doing?
No.
Do you know whether or not that right arm or left arm is holding what you said may have been a right arm, whether or not that's holding up that arm?
That's certainly possible.
And you don't know what, for example, the left arm is doing, do you?
That's correct.
And this
Can't win.
part up here, I know that this is straining a little bit of credibility, and I don't know medical science, but that's the top of the head, right?
Yes.
And if I'm wrong, tell me that, right?
Yes.
And this part right here is the neck, right?
Yes.
You see any blood coming down this from the top of the head?
It's very dark. I can't say for sure whether.
But can you see any blood coming from the neck area there?
Yes.
And if you see the blood coming from the neck area and you know the injuries, and assuming this is Travis Alexander, what would you associate that blood
For
with?
18
The
days.
cut to the throat.
And with regard to the injury to the
I cannot wait.
to the chest area, if his head is up in that position and his arm is being lifted in that position, and knowing what you know about gravity, would you think that this blood was coming from the injury to his chest or the neck area?
Neck area.
So one of the things that you were asked about was the wounds to the back.
Won't happen.
Do you remember
Yes.
being asked about that? And this question may or may not be your area. but,
Early January
with
to early
regard
May.
to human beings, are men's arms longer than women's or not? I don't know.
Generally longer. Yes.
And with regard to
Do what you can about me, but I'm not afraid of
person's body,
commitment.
generally speaking, is a man's body upper chest, is that bigger or smaller than a woman's upper chest?
Bigger.
Bigger. And you were asked about the injuries that were to the back. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you were asked, well, is it possible that somebody could have come around and with those given what those injuries are there, that they would have come around and done this and done the injuries back then? Do you remember being asked that?
Yes.
And you said, well, it's possible, right?
Yes.
With regard to that particular scenario, is it also possible that an individual could be hunched over and somebody came up behind him and started inflicting those kinds of injuries? Are they consistent with that?
Yes.
And with regard to the injury to the chest, you said, well, it's slightly upward. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Is it possible that with regard to that injury, it could have come up like this? Was that possible?
Yes.
Is there any impediment or anything in the way to doing something like that?
No.
Do we have to
he
wrap
doing
arms
this with a
around
court reporter?
somebody to get that injury? Or
Did he just do
like
that?
this.
Oh my gosh! Leave the court
It can be from the
reporter
front or
alone.
back. Yes.
What, is it consistent,
He did
that
nothing
injury,
to
if
you.
somebody's sitting down, male, Mr. Alexander, is it consistent if he's sitting down and somebody is standing and you come up and do that? Is that consistent with that?
Yes.
He said, "I didn't ask for this." He's like, "I can make you say anything I want,
The
sir.
gunshot wound.
Just wait till they look at it later on."
Did the gunshot wound go through the frontal lobe or not?
It did.
If it goes through the frontal lobe, what does the human body do when a gunshot goes through the frontal lobe?
Well, there's a shock delivered to the entire brain as a projectile is passing through. So
Right.
it's not just like an arrow or a nail. You've also got expanding gases. You've got a tumbling projectile. So generally you're going to have, it's a shock situation, neurologic shock, and those people are incapacitated.
Yes, please ask for consent first. He did not ask to be a part
And
of this.
that gunshot wound that we're talking about, did it go through the mouth or not?
It goes above the mouth. It's in the sinus structures. So bleeding out of the mouth is certainly
And
possible.
it ended up in the left cheek, correct?
Cheek, yes.
The distance of the gunshot wound, you said it was indeterminate, right?
Yes.
And that's based on the fact that you don't see any stippling there, right?
That's right.
And indeterminate to you in this case, if it's indeterminate, I know what the word means, but how far, can you give us any parameters whatsoever as to how far or how close the gunshot was?
Again, I'm not a ballistics expert, but generally speaking, for most firearms, it's going to be a minimum distance of a couple of feet, at least.
Okay. And this gunshot wound, was there hemorrhaging that was associated with it on the path that it traveled?
In the scalp and in the cheek area, there is some hemorrhage. There is no hemorrhage detected in the skull itself.
And what does that mean to you in terms of the sequencing, whether or not the person was alive or not alive, if there's no blood there?
If there's less blood, it may mean that the other injuries preceded that, and there was just less bleeding because there was less blood to come out of the body.
Could this person have been dead at the time that the gunshot wound was inflicted?
That's possible, yes.
And in terms of what an individual may have said or didn't say, you did indicate that, your report does indicate that Detective Flores was at the autopsy, right?
Yes.
Does it have an MD after his name? Maybe I missed that.
No.
So in terms of this individual, Detective Flores, what he may or may have said, do you have any idea where he gained his knowledge?
I don't know.
But your knowledge is based on what you saw, what? At the autopsy, your schooling, and anything else that was provided to you, right?
Yes.
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Does any member of the jury have a question for this witness? I see no hands. You may step down. State may call its next witness.
May I have your name
Elizabeth A. Northcutt,
and who do you work for?
the City of Mesa Police Department Forensic Services Section.
What do you do for them?
I'm a forensic firearms examiner.
And as a firearms examiner, what are your day-to-day duties?
I do firearms examinations, cartridge case and bullet examinations, distance determinations, serial number restorations, respond to crime scenes for documentation.
The microphone's a little bit far away, if you don't mind. It's the one in front of you. That one. How long have you been employed involving this particular area?
In firearms,
Yes.
8 years.
And in this, involving the investigation or the murder of Travis Alexander, did you have occasion to take a look at a cartridge casing?
Yes, I did.
What is a cartridge casing?
A cartridge casing is a container that holds powder, a primer, and a bullet in a cartridge, which is a basic unit of ammunition.
You said that it holds a bullet. Does the casing always have to hold a bullet or not?
No, it doesn't.
What if a bullet is fired? What happens to the casing?
Then it's a fire cartridge case.
With regard to the casing, if it is fired from a semi-automatic handgun, what happens to the casing after the bullet is fired?
It is extracted and ejected.
What is a semi-automatic handgun, and why is the casing extracted and ejected?
A semi-automatic handgun is a handgun that extracts and ejects fired cartridge cases. When the cartridge case is fired, the firing pin hits the primer, which is in the back of the cartridge case, and that ignites the powder inside the cartridge case, which begins to burn, producing gas. That gas makes pressure inside of the cartridge case, which then pushes the bullet down the barrel and on its way toward a target.
I don't know how they
The
found all these
pressure also pushes
witnesses,
back on the
but
slide
they're
in a semi-auto
phenomenal
pistol
at teaching.
and extracts and
Phenomenal.
ejects that cartridge case.
Are you familiar with a revolver?
Yes, I am.
And in terms of the casing issue and extraction and putting it out there, what is the difference?
A revolver does not automatically extract and eject the fired cartridge case. You have to manually open the revolver to action and remove the cartridge case before you can put another cartridge in a chamber.
So if you find a casing at a scene, for example, what does that indicate to you? In terms of whether it's a semi-automatic or a revolver?
With revolvers, you typically do not find cartridge cases at a scene.
Why is that?
And, you'd have to reload the revolver. You'd have to open the action, remove the cartridge case, and leave it at the scene.
Well, I think what I'm hearing you say is that with a revolver, you'd have to fire it, open up the revolver part, take it out and drop it in and close it up again, right?
That's correct.
And with the semi-automatic, you fire the gun and the casing comes out automatically, right?
That's correct.
So if you see one at a scene, the indication is perhaps is a semi-automatic, would be your opinion, right?
Yes.
Now, take a look at Exhibit 218. Let's see if you're familiar with that.
Girl, same.
Yes, I am.
Do you recognize it?
Yes,
And have you had occasion to examine it?
I have.
What kind of, all it is, not all, but it's a casing. What is it that you did with it to further this investigation, or what was it that you were asked to do?
I examined the cartridge case and observed that it had a head stamp
Okay?
that read Win 25 Auto.
What does that mean to you, Win 25 Auto?
It is manufactured or branded as Winchester.
And when it says auto, I thought we were talking about semi-automatic handguns. Well, does the fact that it say auto on it mean something to you?
The auto is part of the name of the cartridge, and it designates that it is designed to be fired in a auto-loading pistol.
It's what now? What did you say? I didn't understand what you said.
The auto in 25 Auto is part of the caliber designation for the cartridge case. And so the auto is, in this particular instance, indicates that it was this cartridge, it's the designation. So 25 Auto is designed to be fired in an auto-loading pistol.
So are you saying that this 25 auto can only be fired in an automatic handgun? Is that what you're telling me, or not?
No, that's.
What is it that you're telling me? Is that just the name of it, Winchester Auto, 25
Yes.
Auto? Is that all it is? Is that all you're telling me?
It's a caliber designation, yes.
Okay, and in anything else with regard to that casing?
I entered that casing into the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network.
Why would you do that?
The database holds cartridge case images from other crimes, and we enter images of other crime evidence in that database to look for hits or high confidence candidates. So when you enter a cartridge case into that, it gives you a list of possible candidates back. You go through those correlations and you determine if there are any high confidence candidates. So if there are any hits. I did not find any in this case.
So in this case, you entered it in a database and you got nothing back, right?
That's correct.
Anything else with regard to that casing that you did?
No.
Did you also have occasion to work with exhibit number 244? And this is the bullet from the medical examiner.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And if we take a look at it here, it's Exhibit 210. You see that?
Yes,
Is that the bullet?
it appears to be.
When you say it appears to be, always leaves room for doubt. Do you need to open it to make sure or not? Why don't you open it up and take a look at it to make sure it is the bullet?
Yes, it is.
Okay, if you could go ahead and seal it and put it back for me. With regard to this bullet, were you able to determine the caliber of this bullet? In other words, can you just take a look at that bullet and go back and see what the caliber of it is?
I examined the basic characteristics, physical characteristics of that bullet, and I measured the base diameter, which helps us to figure out caliber. I also looked at the bullet weight and the other style that the bullet has. And all of those led me to the determination that this is consistent with the .25 auto bullet.
So you can go back and attempt to do that then, right?
Yes.
And what is it that indicate, how much does a .25 caliber bullet weigh?
Typically about 50 grains.
50 grains?
Yes.
And how much did this bullet weigh?
44.8.
And the fact that it didn't weigh the same, does that indicate to you that it isn't the 25 or that it is, given the circumstances?
No, bullets are frequently damaged when they're fired and they can lose weight that way. So that's not a big discrepancy, 44.8 to 50 grains.
And anything else about the bullets that you found? For example, any markings, striations on it, anything like that?
Yes, there were rifling impressions on the bullet.
When you say rifling impressions, those are impressions on the bullet, right?
That's correct.
And these impressions on the bullet, what are they made by?
They're left by rifling inside the firearm.
So is it the muzzle of the gun that leaves them? Is that where the rifling is?
The rifling is from the entire barrel.
So it's in the barrel of the gun.
Yes.
And what characteristics did this one have?
This one had 6 rifling. What rifling is it's a series of helical or spiral grooves that go the length of a barrel. And what they do is they help impart stability to the fired bullet.
Welcome,
And
Terry.
so looking at the
Kool-Aid
rifling, I think you said it was
and
6 lands and grooves, I think?
6 lines and
Join us.
grooves with a right hand twist. They can either be right or left hand twist.
So 6 lands and grooves with right hand twist, is that consistent with a .25 caliber bullet? Or not? Or it has nothing to do with that?
It has nothing to do with it.
Okay. But is it your opinion that this is a .25 caliber bullet?
Yes, fired 25 caliber bullet.
To get back very quickly to the casing, take a look at Exhibit 114. It'll auto focus in a minute. With regard to the casing that you looked at, is that the casing that you looked at?
It appears to be.
When you say it appears to be, why don't you go ahead and take a look at the casing? Do you have that up there with you?
I do.
And take a look at the markings on it. What item number was the casing out at the scene as indicated by the exhibit?
1 LB.
1 LB, but it was 1, right?
Yes.
And if you take a look at exhibit number 114, what number is by the casing?
1.
I don't have any other questions.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Ms. Northcutt.
Good afternoon.
Through all of your examinations that you did on the casing and the bullet, you were never
I
able
love
to
his
match
crosses.
either one
They're very
to a
good.
specific gun, right?
Did not have a firearm in this case, no.
And in fact, this casing and,
It was
this
that
particular
boy.
casing
Jodi
actually
knew she
can match
done
several different
good.
types of guns. Is that right?
That's correct.
And You're familiar with crime scenes, aren't you?
Yes.
And in crime scenes, especially if there's a struggle that is going on, you know that casings aren't always left where they are ejected.
That's correct.
Sometimes they can be kicked around.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That's all you have.
I
Can you
want to
redirect?
push you around.
With
Well,
regard to
I
this
will.
25
Well, I
caliber casing,
will.
is it a magical casing?
No.
Objection argument.
Sustained.
Is there anything unusual about this 25
Court
caliber
reporter was
casing?
like, what do you say?
No.
And so that if, for example, there's blood on the ground, assuming that you were talking about a crime scene, you've been to crime scenes, right?
Yes.
And there is blood on the ground. Take a look at Exhibit 114. See that there?
Yes.
See, there's a reddish brown substance there, right?
Yes.
And you see that the casing is there, right? Number
Yeah.
one, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And does the top of it have any blood on it? Can you see that?
No.
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
It's beyond the scope of process.
May continue.
With regard to this particular casing, you see the top of it?
Yes.
Is there any reddish substance consistent with blood on top of it?
No.
And this reddish substance is where? Underneath it or on it?
Underneath it.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Does any member of the jury have a question for this witness? I see no hands. You may step down.
Whew. Wowzers. Wowzers. So here's my question for you all. The next video is also about 2 hours long. It is a former business acquaintance and friend, I believe, of Travis. I am kind of willing to be like, hey, let's end it. Let's have a good 3-day weekend. That's kind of where I'm headed with this. Or we can do a little bit of the next one. It's totally up to you. It is bad. Okay. Brandi just put in a poll. I'm not dancing the poll, but you guys can answer the poll. We're going to land in a great spot. You are always invited. We'll set it up. Oh boy. It's been a really long day for everybody, including our mods. Land the plane. Everybody's telling me to land the plane. I can tell you the jerky turkey story. Sure. It's not as special. Yes, no. You know, I always like to go with the popular vote. The Electoral College is a joke, but I think just thinking about the mods and everything they did today with almost 1,000 people and just all the hard work they did. I know you guys don't see what happens in the background. Hey, listen, my name's not Elizabeth Northcutt. I should probably take that off. I know that you guys don't really see the background stuff, but it's a lot to go through. And they do a great job. Okay, so I used to have a librarian in high school, and she took every single day, she would come up with something like you all did. She would come up with something different for my initials. And then eventually, two things stuck. Mrs. Cones, I'll never forget her. It was jerky turkey or it was just terrific, depending on the day. That's my silly, not really silly joke. But that is the joke nonetheless. And I'll never forget. She was wonderful. Just to give you an idea of what's coming up with the trial, we've got Ryan Burns, who was the business partner. We've got an investigator testimony, a special agent testimony, who special agent looks like he could be a new trial daddy. Forensic scientist, Detective Flores is recalled, in which case I think it's looking like that's when we're going to get the interrogation video. So we probably have a couple days until the interrogation video, but yes. I'm psyched to get to where we're going. I'm looking at some pictures of these tests. You guys are gonna like a few of these folks, that's for sure. Oh boy, Django Tango. Jeff, it's Memorial Day. It's Memorial Day. My family rolls deep military, but also I think there's a good reason why it's a holiday, in order to recognize those who gave a lot and everything for my ability to do this, and I think that it's good to be off for that time. So here's what I'll say to you all. Brandi and I are working on that premiere. Somebody talked about a premiere where we combine the videos of the Travis Rudolph case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine those videos. I'm going to do my best to remove like the breaks. I might miss one or two. And then Brandi's going to put up a poll for everybody on Twitter, for those of you who have Twitter, in order to vote. Your polls. She's going to put up a poll on Twitter for you to vote in terms of when you want to play it, Sunday or Monday, I think. And so once we get that together, it'll go up as a premiere. Now, listen, I don't expect our mods are not going to be there. I want them to be off. They've had a fast and furious week. And I'm sure everybody's going to behave if you're in there, but definitely remember the rules of everything. And so again, mods, if you're listening, I know you just heard a premiere. Don't come to it, please, because it's going to be the 3 days in a row, all together. So that being said, that premiere is going to be here on YouTube, and if you have your notifications on, it'll go out. We'll also be pushing it on Twitter. We'll also be pushing not only on Brandi and my Twitter, but also 13th Juror Pod, which is the 13th Juror Twitter. We also have a 13th Juror Facebook as well. So check us out. Yes, they are the best. They are the best. I love it. Every time I come back at the end of a stream, they have like things lined up, just being like, look at all these things we got for you, in terms of like, yes, enough to let me go to bed. Yes, you love me. You like me. You really like me. Amos, you're not being fired. Good grief. All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for joining us. This is something that Brandi and I have been planning for a long time, in terms of, well, long time. It's something we were thinking about doing, and I'm really glad that you guys like this. It was gonna either be one way or the other, but I'm super glad that this is a good core group of people that likes to watch these trials, those reruns, even though we know what happens. So, with all that being said, thank you very much. Thanks for showing up for jury duty. And I know that this was a little bit difficult tonight, despite our chat. Our chat was great. Thank you for that. But always remember that Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers. Be a helper. Look for the helpers. Take care of your friends, your family, and don't forget to smile. And we will see you. Brandi will see you on Tuesday morning. All right, y'all. Bye.